on the lecture given by Shaykh Hamza about 3 years ago at the Turnpike Lane Mosque called, oddly enough, Dajjal and the New World Order, as it is, which I also had the honour and pleasure of presenting. Inshallah, tonight Shaykh Hamza will add many more exciting and or disturbing observations of the events unfolding around us. The Shaykh will also relate more hadith about the Dajjalic period and hadith that describe the last days and what we as Muslims should be doing to prepare. Sorry. Before we start, there are a few rules we have to bear in mind. The organisers are not allowing any other audio or visual recording, so please take note. Only written questions will be answered during the questions and answers session. Only sensible questions will be forwarded to Shaykh Hamza. By that I mean questions related to the lecture, and if we have time, other questions will be explained, inshallah. Also, books and audio visual material are available outside, as you've probably already seen. And after the lecture, Shaykh Hamza will not really have much time to stay behind and chat like normally in most lectures, and we would request that nobody approach the stage at the end of the lecture. Before I hand you over to Shaykh Hamza, I would like to mention that tomorrow, inshallah, Sidi Muhammad Sharif will be giving a lecture here in this building tomorrow, Saturday the 6th of June at 1:30 p.m. on the subject of Arabic manuscripts in America and Africa, and the subtitle of which is Who Found America, Columbus or Someone Else? I would urge everybody to attend this lecture tomorrow, as it will prove to be enlightening and very interesting. Tickets are also available outside, I believe, and the price of them is again £5. I will now hand over to Shaykh Hamza. Jazakallah khair.
السلام عليكم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحابته ومن والاه. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت السميع العليم. الحمد لله. أحمد الله إليكم. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of you bringing me here safely, and also for people coming out to inshallah benefit maybe with some insights. What I want to really do tonight, I don't have much more to say than I've already said in a lot of different talks. And so there's going to be some reiterations and maybe a few clarifications. But what I would like to say is that we're living in very powerful times right now. We are living in apocalyptic times. We're living in times in which change is happening at such a rapid rate, it's unprecedented in the history of human societies. The changes that are taking place now in the world are unprecedented. If you look, for instance, at the word innovation, in Old English, if you see the word in Shakespeare's plays, it always has a negative connotation. Innovation was seen as something that was negative. It was seen as something that was disruptive to societies. When you innovated, you created a disequilibrium that would need to reestablish itself after a period of time. And I think for the Muslims, the idea of innovation tends to have a negative understanding. If we say in the Arabic language innovation, the word is bid'ah. And generally bid'ah has a negative connotation, although it's not considered to be a bid'ah lughawiyya or a linguistic innovation, but rather a bid'ah shar'iyya, or an innovation that relates to the sharia. that relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws. And so the Muslims at their scholastic level understand the differences. But at the level of the person on the street, and this is called a haqiqa urfiyya, or a something that is not related to a linguistic meaning, nor to a sharia meaning or a legal ruling, but rather a customary meaning amongst the people. And in customary practice, bid'ah has a very negative connotation. And yet, this is an age in which there is constant ibda' in Arabic, constantly. In fact, there are people, particularly in the West, that work night and day to innovate. And they see that innovation is really the pinnacle of their civilization. They see that bringing new, see the new, but it's similar to the old story of Aladdin. You know, Aladdin found a lamp. It was an old lamp, and it was in his house. And his mother, a magician, came by who knew the value of the old lamp. And so he came by and he said, "Old, new lamps for old." He said, "New lamps for old." And the woman, not understanding the value of what she had, said, "Who wants an old lamp when you can have a new lamp?" And so she went out and she gave him the new lamp, the old lamp, and she got the new lamp, which was worthless. And this is a story that has wisdom in it. You're often invited to something new, but the cost of that new thing is a rejection of the old ways. Now, to give you an example, when television was first introduced into Western culture, people really didn't want to watch it. First of all, the screen was incredibly small. It was very grainy, black and white, and there was nothing on. And in fact, if you look at the predictions in the 1940s about television, they say this thing's not going to go anywhere. Now we have a society in which the new way of entertaining oneself has replaced the old way. The old way was that human beings actually sat together and talked and discussed things. And the new way is that they watch cathode rays flickering out in darkened rooms all over the globe. In fact, this city has millions of people doing just that while you're here listening to somebody actually speak, a human being, not on it. They'll put it on screen soon enough, right? But the point is that there'll be people watching these, and this is not simply in England, this is all over the world. This is a global phenomenon. And we have to realize the power that this phenomenon is taking over. But the point being is that this innovation, this constant quest for the new, and this is why in their advertisements they're always saying new and improved, constantly flashing, new and improved. And this is the idea that modern man has, that the old has no value in it. New lamps for old. We'll replace your old lamps with new lamps. Now, unfortunately, the Muslims have traded their old lamp as well. And the old lamp worked. You could get things done with it. But they stopped believing that at a certain point. And they suddenly began to say, we need to innovate. We need to also do what the West has done in order to catch up with them. So, the time that we're living in is a time of massive and rapid change. And most peoples are in such a state of disequilibrium, whether in the West or in the East. There's just a state of disequilibrium everywhere. A state of turmoil and chaos. And it's increasing. And you will see it increase. And this is part of the end time scenario. Now, what I wanted to do tonight before I go in to really the point of the lecture, inshallah, I wanted to look at some of the signs of the end of time. And the reason I want to do that is for a couple of reasons. One of them, because one of my teachers, Shaykh Abdurrahman told me that it's important that the Muslims of this age know the signs of the end of time. It is important that they know the signs of the end of time because a number of things happen towards the end of time, and one of them is confusion. People become confused. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that a man will get up in the morning with his intellect and he'll go to bed in a state of bewilderment. A man will wake up in the morning with his intellect and he will go to sleep in a state of bewilderment. يُصْبِحُ الْمَرْءُ حَلِيمًا وَيُمْسِي حَيْرَانًا. In another tradition, the Prophet ﷺ said that مَنْ يَعِيشْ مُنْكُمْ, whoever lives from amongst you, فَسَيَرَى أُمُورًا عِظَامًا, he will see great things, vast things, unbelievable things. يَتَفَاقَمُ شَأْنُهَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ. The matters of those things will be so vast when you look at them. They'll seem so incredible to the people. And then he said to the point, حَتَّى يَذْكُرْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا هَلْ ذَكَرَ نَبِيُّنَا شَيْئًا مِنْ هَذِهِ. Did our Prophet make mention of any of these things? Did our Prophet make mention of any of these things? Did our Prophet make mention of America? Did our Prophet make mention of the television? Did our Prophet make mention of the mass media, of public relations? Did our Prophet make mention of the fact that our cities would be bombed with impunity and the Muslims would sit by and watch it happen? And some of them would watch it happen on the news and then go back to their dinner? We're living in very, very powerful times. And so the importance of knowing the signs is that when you recognize a sign, if you're educated, you know what it means. Because a sign symbolizes something. That's the nature of signs. They symbolize. So for instance, in the Arabic language, you learn that in grammar, you have signs. You have signs of inflection, i'rab. You have signs that are ashkal or vowelings, and you have signs that are letters. And so when you see those signs in the Arabic script, you know what they mean. So if I see, for instance, ضَرَبَ زَيْدٌ عَمْرًا, and I see that Zaydun has a dhamma and Amran has a fatha, then I know that Zayd is marfu'. I mean, if you don't know grammar, this doesn't mean anything to you, and that's my point. If you don't know how to read signs, you can't read the Arabic language. If you don't know the sign, you will not be able to read the Arabic language. You won't know, did Zayd hit Amr or did Amr hit Zayd? Because in the English language, we say Zayd hit Amr. There's a linear sequence. Right? You have subject, verb, predicate. It's easy. In Arabic, you have signs. And if you can't read those signs, you can't read the sentence. It won't make any sense. Because I could say, Amran darabahu Zaydun. And I can mention Amr first. So the point being is, if you don't know how to read signs, you won't understand anything. And this is part of the age we're living in. If you don't understand the signs, you won't know what it means. And if you don't know what it means, the nature of not knowing the meaning of something is that you become confused. And the nature of confusion is that you lose your stability. And the word in Arabic for stability is thabat. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the end of time, ask for thabat. Al-thabat, al-thabat. Stability on your deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُثَبِّتُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. That Allah will give stability to those who believe with the firm word, which is La ilaha illallah, in this world and in the next world, so that nothing happens will sway them from understanding the essential reality of the world, which is La ilaha illallah. That's the whole message. That's the message. Everything you see is saying La ilaha illallah, whether you can read it or not. Because the sentence has meaning whether the person hearing it understands it or not. You see, a high-energy physicist can be talking to another physicist and you're sitting there, it doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that what he's saying doesn't mean anything. It's just you don't understand it. And so you're in a maqam of ignorance. And Islam is a maqam of knowledge. So if the Muslims are ignorant, they're not in the maqam of Islam. They're not in the station of Islam. They've lost the station. So if you look at the signs, there are certain signs. One of the signs, there are basically three signs, three types of signs. One of the signs has happened and it won't happen again. It's happened and it won't happen again. The second type of sign is a sign that happened, but it will continue to increase in severity and clarity. It will continue to increase. And the final signs are those that have not manifested yet. So those are the three types of signs. An example of the first one is the coming of the Prophet ﷺ himself. The Jews, in their books, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. They know the messenger like they know their own children. And Abdullah ibn Salam said, even more, Ya Rasulullah, because we could have some doubts about our wife, but we would never doubt you. Allah said that they know the Prophet like they know their own children. What does that mean? Your children is distinguished from other children by signs. So you can recognize him from other children. If he doesn't have those signs, you can't recognize him. If somebody did plastic surgery on him and brought him in, you'd have a hard time. You might still be able to, but you'd have a hard time because there's been signs that have been taken away. So they knew that he was coming. They had it in their books. The Christians knew that he was coming. They had it in their books. And this is, you see, it's very interesting the time we're living in. In 1948, they discovered the Nag Hammadi Library. And yet, the sad thing about it is they discovered it in a Muslim land. And yet we allowed people who were not from the Muslim tradition to take those treasures. They were treasures. They were 1st century, 2nd century manuscripts, 3rd century Christian manuscripts, some of the earliest apocryphal texts. And they took them, and some of it was released and others weren't. The same happened again, not much later. In the cave of Qumran, a Bedouin, Jordanian Bedouin, wanted to get shade in a cave, and he went up and he found some jugs. And he broke one of them, and inside there was a copper scroll. And here's a man again, no signs, he can't read. He doesn't know what it means, but he thinks, and Bedouins think like this sometimes, he thinks this could be worth something. So he took it into the town and sold it to an Armenian, a Christian Armenian, who then sold it to Christian researchers. And then he said, can you get more of these? And he said, yes. He said, show me where they are. I said, no, I'll bring them to you. And finally, when he thought he'd sold it out, he showed him where the caves were. That scripture still has not been released in its entirety to the world. In fact, the book of Isaiah, which is one of the prophetic books of the Old Testament, is hermetically sealed in the Rockefeller Museum in Tel Aviv. They won't even let researchers look at it. It's not to be opened for 150 years or something. The Catholics and the Israeli government began to actually work together, suppressing the material. And you have to ask, well, what do the Catholics and the Israelis have in common? That they want to suppress material. And this isn't conspiracy theory. This is fact. The researchers within the archaeological community were complaining about this. Let us see the manuscript. We want to see them. Can't do that. Why not? We're still looking at them. What are they afraid of that are in there? Seriously, people have to think about this. What are they afraid of that are in there? Now, the fact that the Jews had tribes living in Medina was a clear proof that they knew that there was a prophet coming to that place. Salman al-Farisi radiallahu anhu was told by a monk in Syria that there would be a prophet in the end of time that would show up in Yathrib, and it's in the books, and he would have such and such signs. Haraqal, the emperor, when he sent the Tanuhi to the Prophet ﷺ, he asked him, he said, see if he reads the letter, see if he mentions the night and the day, see if there's anything between his shoulder blades. And that man became a Muslim in the time of Muawiyah, who reports that. And the Sahaba witnessed that. They witnessed the questions that were posed to him by the emperor. They knew, they had knowledge. So the Prophet ﷺ was the first sign of the beginning of the end. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that the next sign, there would be 6. The next sign would be the opening of Bayt al-Maqdis. Now Bayt al-Maqdis is a very important place because it's the place in which the 3 traditions have something in common there. The Christians see it as the place in which Jesus will establish. According to the evangelicals, you'll get different opinions about this. But they see it as the New Jerusalem will be established as a capital for the millennial period of Christ. This is the modern evangelical belief. It's a 19th century belief. It's a bid'ah in their tradition. The Catholics did not believe that. They thought it was metaphorical, allegorical. That's the way Augustine interpreted it. The modern evangelicals, which are the fastest growing by proselytation religion. We grow fast. We're always saying the Muslim fastest growing religion. We're the fastest reproducing religion. Seriously, we're the fastest reproducing religion. And there's something to be said for that. But we are not the fastest growing religion in terms of conversion. The fastest growing religion in terms of conversion is Pentecostal Christianity. They've had 50 million conversions in South America alone. The South Americans were Catholic. They have worked very seriously. And there's a very strong link between the Israeli government and Pentecostal Christians. The Pentecostals in the United States support them. And one of the very interesting things about the Pentecostals is that they have television stations and radio stations 24 hours a day. They're talking about the end is near, the end is near. The Jews are announcing 2 years ago that the red heifer was born. People don't even know what this stuff means. What the red heifer? Because they believe that a red heifer would be born in Palestine right before the coming of the Messiah. Now they can clone it, for all we know. They can do that now. They can make it red, purple, pink, whatever their scripture said, they could work it out. Right? So we don't know. The point is, they're claiming that it was born. The Christian support of the Jews in America is extraordinary. In classical Christianity, the Jews were seen as a curse because they rejected the covenant, the new covenant. That's why it's called the New Testament. There's the Old Testament, the New Testament. They rejected the covenant, and for that reason they lose their special status as God's chosen people. This was the traditional Catholic and Orthodox view. But with the Protestant Reformation and the rise of new interpretations of the Bible, you got the evangelicals beginning to say no. In fact, the Jews were still the chosen people. And not only that, that the Messiah would come, he would establish his state in Israel, the Jews would be redeemed by their acceptance of him the second time around, not the first time. And so this is the modern version. These people are very active, and the Muslims are asleep because they're active in the Muslim lands. They have missionaries that go as nurses, as doctors, to the heartland of the Muslims, pretending not to be missionaries. And I know this with corroborated evidence. I have no doubt about this. They have conversions in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, Turkey, Iran. Wherever you find weakness amongst the Muslims, they have conversion. And this is unprecedented because the Muslims traditionally did not convert to other religions. Now, another thing that people should be aware of is that the Americans now have put forth a law in the Senate, which is the freedom of religion. It's a global act that the Americans will sanction any country that does not allow a person to apostate from his religion to another religion. That country will be sanctioned if they do not allow churches to be built on their territory. This is right now, this is going on in America. There's a move because the Christians are very strong in America. You know, if you watch too much TV, you'll get a very distorted view of America. People forget about Middle America, the Bible Belt. If you live where I live, in California, it's a pagan land. They're pagans. They worship sun, the moon, goddesses, sprites, witches. I could go on and on. They've got everything. Yogurt, I think they probably have a temple to yogurt. Avocado sandwiches. And if you go to New York, it's also, they don't believe, they're just secularists, right? Their religion is cynicism. And they promote it actively in a sitcom called Seinfeld. This was the religion of cynicism being broadcast to millions of people, learning the religion of cynicism, making fun of other people, laughing at people's misfortunes, right? I mean, this is taught proselytizing. There's many ways to proselytize. So the second type of, the 6, Bayt al-Maqdis, and then 2 deaths, Mawtani, 2 deaths that will take you, يَأْخُذُ فِيكُمْ كَعِقَاصِ الْغَنَمِ. There's 2 deaths, and there's different interpretations about that. Many of our scholars say that it's Umar and Uthman, the death of Umar and Uthman. Others say it was plagues that were afflicted certain places. There's no doubt that Umar, his death was predicted not only by the Prophet ﷺ when he was on Jabal Uhud, and the Jabal began to shake, and he said, "Do you shake, and on you is a prophet and 2 martyrs?" Because Uthman and Umar were on him that day, on the mountain. But the Jews also knew, because Ka'b al-Ahbar, who was a Jewish scholar before he became a Muslim, he wasn't a Sahabi, he was from the Tabi'een, and he was a advisor to Sayyidina Umar, and he told Umar, "Your description is in the Torah, and you'll be killed in such and such a way." So Umar himself was in the books of the Jews. Ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, which shouldn't surprise people. And then you would have, after the opening of Constantine, and then the 2 deaths, 1 and 2, so that's the 4, and then you would have the fitna of the Romans. There would be a fitna, and in a riwayah, a hudna, that took place between you and the Romans. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the Romans would come to you with 80 flags. And under each flag would be 12,000 soldiers. 80 flags, and under each flag would be 12,000 soldiers. Now the Romans don't have 80 countries. But it says tahta ثمانين راية, under 80 flags. So it's like an umbrella. And this is, Allahu Alam, a clear indication of the United Nations, or something similar to it. If you do that, you will find it's close to 1 million. So close to 1 million soldiers under the authority of the Romans, which are the Europeans. When you read Rome in the Hadith, you understand it to be the Europeans, the Franks, the Germans, the Anglo-Saxon, the Italians, the Spanish. These are the Romans, Rome. Ban al-Asfar, the light-skinned people, they're also called in the Hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that would happen. And he also said that the malhama would take place after that. And the malhama is a huge battle that takes place in the desert. Allahu alam, some say that it's what the Christians refer to as Armageddon and the Jews. Allahu ta'ala. But there will be a malhama there. Now, the third type, the second type is one that happens and continues to increase. And you will see that, for instance, in women's clothing. The Prophet ﷺ said, one of the signs of the end of time, صِنْفَانِ مِنْ أَهْلِ النَّارِ لَمْ أَرَاهُمَا, two types of people from the fire, I haven't seen them yet. And then he spoke about the police according to Muhammad Habibullah in his commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari متفق عليه Bukhari and Muslim. He said that رِجَالٌ لَهُمْ سِيَاطٌ يَضْرِبُونَ النَّاسَ بِهَا, men who have siyat كَأَذْنَابَ الْبَقَرِ, and they hit people. And in a riwayat, يَغْضُونَ فِي سَخَطِ اللَّهِ وَيَرَوْحُونَ فِي عَقْبِهِ. They go in the morning, they're in the anger, wrath of Allah, and when they go in the afternoon, they're in the wrath of Allah. And these are people who support tyrants and beat people down, like we're seeing now in many places in the earth. The second type of people were kasiyatun, adiyatun, ma'ilatun, mumilatun, ala ru'usihinna ka'asmilat al-bukht. Women who would be naked and dressed at the same time. Now, in the traditional hadith commentaries, if you read them, jazakumullahu khairan, they usually said kasiyatun fi dunya, ariyatun fil akhirah. They have clothes in this world, but no clothes in the next world, because they couldn't understand this is in logic. It doesn't work. How can you be dressed and naked at the same time? And this is pre-spandex logic. This is logic before. We know how people can be dressed and naked at the same time now. So the Prophet ﷺ said there would be women who were dressed and naked at the same time. They inclined in their walking, and they caused others to incline towards them with their shahwat, with their desire. They wore their hair like aslimat al-bukht, which are the humps of the Bakhtian camel. Not the Arabic camel, which the Bakhtian camel, the hair is all over the place. Right? This is very interesting description. You look at a Bakhtian camel and then look at a picture of Tina Turner. And you'll get the picture immediately. Now the sad thing about it is, now we've got Khadijas and Fatimas imitating. You see, in the Muslim land, the land of the Muslim, where modesty is the characteristic of this deen, that's the sign of the deen. If you don't have modesty, you don't have the sign by which this deen is recognized. Because every deen has a sign. And the Prophet ﷺ said the characteristic of my deen, لِكُلِّ دِينٍ خُلُقٍ وَخُلُقُ الْإِسْلَامَ الْحَيَاةِ. Every deen has a characteristic, and the characteristic of my deen is modesty. If you do not have modesty, then you don't have a portion of the Prophet ﷺ's deen. So a woman who loses that, it means that she lost modesty. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, it's a sign. It's not, the fact that she is dressed like that is not what takes her to the hellfire. That is only a sign of what takes her to the hellfire. What takes her to the hellfire is a loss of iman that has resulted in the manifestation of the sign. So that is a sign for people. And that's why our women have to wake up. They have to wake up. Really, the women have to wake up and recognize that if they are kasiyatun ariyat, ma'ilat mumilat, then they're manifesting a sign. And the Prophet ﷺ said, La yajidanna raihat al-jannah. These women won't find the scent of paradise. وَإِنَّ رَائِحَتَهَا لِمَسِيرَةِ 500 عام. And its scent continues for 500 years. Now, that obviously, sufur, or women not wearing proper clothing, was a sign that scholars have been complaining about since the 1st century. But if they were alive now, they would have to pass out. They wouldn't have there's no frame of reference. Right? Seriously. There's no frame of reference. So the later people are only completing the sign. It continues to increase until by the end of time, the Prophet ﷺ said that a man will have a woman on the side of the road. And the best of them, أَمْثَالُهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ الَّذِي يَقُولُ لَوْ نَحِيتَهَا عَنَ الطَّرِيقِ قَلِيلًا. Would that you would just move her out of the way. And he said, يَتَهَارَجُونَ كَتَهَارُجُ الْحَمِيرِ. That people would have sexual orgies and things like donkeys. Or يَتَصَافَتُونَ. I mean, this is in the hadith. And this is all from blind imitation. One of the signs of the end of time about this also is the men taking their women from the adbar, which is haram by the Prophet ﷺ. He made it haram, but he said that people would do it, and from his ummah. And this was something alien to the Muslims. But because of the widespread of pornography and these things in which the Muslims are engaged in, the widespread of pornography in the Muslims and now with the satellite dish, they can bring it into their own homes in Mecca and Medina. Really? It's not an exaggeration. So those signs continue. And then finally, the great signs that haven't come. By consensus of our scholars for some time now, all of the lesser signs have come. All of them. They're complete. They're called Ashrat al-Sughra, Alamat al-Sughra. And I wanted to read one hadith which sums up many of them very well, which is related by Imam al-Qurtushi, a great muhaddith, the teacher of Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, in which he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, it's related on Ibn Abbas, and there's another in the Senate, there's some criticisms. ابن عباس رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من أشراط الساعة أو القيامة إضاعة الصلوات. From the end of time is the loss of prayers. The loss of prayers. Now, I'll tell you something about that hadith. Imam Yusuf Nabahani in his Ida'a says, the loss of prayer does not simply mean that people stop praying. It means even those who praise prayers are unaccepted. Because they don't know anything about the prayer. They don't know the fara'id. They don't know how to correct their sahw if they make a mistake. They can't distinguish between sunan and fada'il. They have no knowledge of the prayer. They don't do their wudu properly. They pray in the improper times, which is one of the signs of the end of time, that people lose the understanding of how the times were determined by the prayer and pray outside of time. Sayyidina Umar in the Muwatta of Imam Malik said, Inni la ara, he wrote a letter to his governors, إني لأرى من أهم أموركم الصلاة فمن حفظها وحافظ عليها فقد حفظ دينه. The most important of all your matters is your prayer. So don't think the prayer is insignificant. The most important of all of your matters is the prayer. The most important of all of your matters is the prayer. So whoever guards it and is vigilant about it, فقد حفظ دينه. He has guarded his deen. ومن ضيعها فهو لما سواها أضيع. And whoever leaves the prayer or is negligent about it, he's negligent more so about everything else in his life. نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسُهُم. They forgot Allah, and so Allah forgot them and caused them to forget their own selves. So a person who leaves the prayer has no tawfiq from Allah. A person negligent about the prayer has no tawfiq from Allah. And this is something that we've forgotten. And then he said, وَاتِّبَاعِ الشَّهَوَاتِ, following the shahawat. And in a riwayah is the تَخْتَلِفَ الْأَهْوَاء, that passions would become diversified. People would have diverse passions. And what that means is that towards the end of time, modern man in all his glory. This is modern man. His passions would be diversified. This is the modern consumer. And if you look, this is actually taken out of a magazine that is not meant for the consumers to see. You're not supposed to see it. It's called Ad Week. It's for people working in advertisements. They sell people. That's their commodity. They sell people. So if you look at this, country music keeps 225 of America's leading brands top of mind with consumers. This is called anchoring in their language. Today, more and more American top marketers are staying top of mind with country music. Get into the heads and hearts of your customers with country music marketing, and you'll be sold on it too. The Country Music Association makes it easy. We'll put you in touch with people and programs you need to learn more for your copy. And this is what they do. So they have Motel 6, Tom Bodine, with his country music guitar, playing well. Come on down to Motel 6. And then there I am. I heard that maybe 10 years ago. It's anchored. And this is what they do. They anchor in your mind. So they want you to remember things. And the best way to anchor things is by associations. This is what they want. And this is what's happened to modern man. Everything's association. The scary and frightening thing to me is I think almost everybody in this room will recognize the vast majority of those symbols. You see? People will recognize that. And this is ikhtilaf al-ahwa. In the old days, there was one type of coffee. Bun. That's what the Arabs called it. Bun. They didn't have mocha and yava and koala and Hawaiian coffee. And you go to America and I don't know, it's probably the same here now. I mean, the Americans want the whole world to drink coffee. That's a national drink. Right? Starbucks. They'll get it here and get people addicted, right? They've measured the coffee addiction levels and they've got it to a fine science, a very fine science. Get people drinking it and so this is what they're doing. Ittiba' al-shahawat, people just follow their passion. So they just follow their passion. وَتَكُونُ أُمَرَاءَ خَوَنًا. The rulers would betray their ummah. وَالْوُزَرَاءَ فَسَقًا. And their wazirs would be bad people. Yes men and whatnot. فقال سلمان رضي الله عنه بأبي أنت وأمي يا رسول الله إن هذا لكائن. By my mother and my father, is this really going to happen? Salman can't believe it. He's living in the heart of the prophetic phenomenon. He can't believe what he's being told. I mean, he can believe it because it's from the Prophet, but he needs to hear it again. It's like it's disbelief. قال نعم يا سلمان عندها يكذب الصادق ويصدق الكاذب. In those days, a truthful man would be considered a liar, and a liar would be considered truthful. ويؤتمن الخائن ويخون فيها المؤتمن. And a person given a trust would be treacherous, and a person who was trustworthy would be considered treacherous. يا سلمان عند ذلك يكون الكذب ظرفا. And this is, in those days, lying would be like an occupation, or it could also be like a witticism. It would be funny. People, comedians and liars and things like that. وَالزَّكَاةُ مَغْرَمًا. And zakat would be considered a fine. It would be considered something that was a fine. And I heard somebody the other day was asking me about zakat, and then when I told them what they owed, they said, oh my God, another bill. And I said, no. Say astaghfirullah. It's not another bill. Zakat purifies your wealth. It'll make the wealth pure. If you don't give out the zakat, it's the same as constipation. It's the same as constipation. Mumsik in Arabic means the one who's withholding the zakat, and it means a constipated one. Zakat is like the awsakh al-mal. It's like the filth of the wealth. You have to get it out in order to purify yourself from it. So it's not a mother. And then he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ أَضَلَّ النَّاسِ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْمُؤْمِنُ يَمْشِي بَيْنَ أَظْهُرِهِمْ بِالْمَخَافَةِ. The most humiliated person in those days would be the believer, who would walk amongst the people out of fear. A believer will have fear. يذوب قلبه في جوفه كما يذوب الملح في الماء مما يرى حوله من المنكرات أو مما يرى حوله ولا يستطيع أن يغير. His heart will melt in his center just like salt melts in water because of what he sees around him from all of the wrongs. And he's unable to change them. And in a riwayah, Hudayfa radiallahu anhu said, يأتي على الناس زمان يخير المرء بين العجز والفجور. There's coming a time when people will be given a choice to be bad people or to be impotent, incapacitated, unable to do anything. And one of the people listening said, قَبَّحَ اللَّهُ الْعَجِزِ. May Allah make ajiz ugly. And he said, قَبَّحْكَ اللَّهُ أَنْتَ. May Allah make you ugly. Ajiz is better than fujur. In other words, if you're giving a choice, be ajiz and don't be fajr. And then he said, يَا سَلْمَنْ عِنْدَ يَكُونَ الْمَطَرُ قَيْضًا. In those days, rain will be burning. Qayd means burning. Acidic rain. The rain will come down and it will burn the earth. Sulfuric rain. Qayda, look it up yourselves. وَالْوَلَدُ غَيْدًا. And children would be filled with rage. In America now, American children have been killing people for a long time, but only recently, nice middle-class white boys have been killing people. And then it makes headlines. But in the inner city, there's been killing going on for a long time now. In the schools, they have, in many inner city schools in the United States, they have to have a gun search before they go in. Seriously, it's a gun search before they go in. Children bringing guns to school, shooting other children. This has been going on this year, unprecedented. These things are happening, people. Children are filled with rage. They're not raised by their parents anymore. They're raised by the television. A Jewish rabbi in London was interviewed on the BBC about his community, and he said, when the man asked about television, he said, we don't allow television in our community. Jewish rabbi, Orthodox Jews. And the man asked him why. Right? BBC, they promote that, television. He asked him why. He said, because it's like having an open sewer in your living room. And who wants an open sewer in your living room? But what it's polluting is the mind itself. It's polluting the mind itself. إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانُوا عَنْهَا مَسْئُولًا. The eye, the ear, the heart, all of those the human being is responsible for. You are responsible for guarding your heart. And the entrances into the heart are the eyes and the ears. The entrances into the heart are the eyes and the ears. If you watch that foulness, you're filling your heart with that foulness. And then it will manifest in your lives. And then he said, وَالْفَيْءُ مَغْرَمًا وَالْمَالُ دُوَلًا. That faith would be considered also a fine, which is related to jihad. And وَالْمَالُ دُوَلًا. And wealth would be only amongst the elite, the rich people. And this is happening. Wealth is increasingly going into a smaller and smaller number of people all over the world. يَا سَلْمَانَ عِنْدَ ذَلِكَ اكْتَفِيَ الرِّجَالُ بِالرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءُ بِالنِّسَاءِ. In those days, a man will be content with another man as a mate. وَالنِّسَاءُ بِالنِّسَاءِ. And women with women. And in one riwayah, there will be heavenly bodies come out of the sky and pound the heads of a people who legitimize sodomy. كواكب تنزل من السماء تضرب على رؤوس قوم يستحلون اللواط. Of people that legitimize sodomy. And this is an age in which sodomy is being legitimized, condemned by all civilizations. This is an age when it's being, and somebody said to me it's something that monkeys, because I said it's an unnatural thing. He said, no, it's in nature, it's monkeys. They don't know about maskh, and the opinion of Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi is that the monkeys continue to mate. There's a hadith that indicates that they stopped, that the maskh la yatanasa, that people that were transmogrified into apes did not have offspring. But Qadi Abu Bakr in his tafsir said the indication, he knew the hadith and actually said there's a strong indication that they do. And he mentioned several stories indicating that. Allah Ta'ala.
And then he said, also in another riwayah, not this one, it says, نِكَاحُ الْمَرْءِ بِالْمَرْءِ وَإِمْرَأَ بِالْإِمْرَأَ. Men and women would get married. They would marry, nikah, which has become legitimized in several states in America. A man and a woman can now be married in a church. 2 men and 2 women. And then he said, تَرْكَبُوا ذَوَاتِ الْفُرُوجِ السُّرُوجِ. You would see women riding on saddles. Now this seemed very strange, but I'll tell you something about this hadith. I was reading a book written by a non-Muslim author about the feminist movement, and they said that one of the most important social acts in England for the feminists was to begin to ride bicycles. It was an act of social protest because it was seen as something unbecoming of a woman to ride a bicycle in public. And it was something that women, they started wearing these bloomers and they went out on these bicycles. And this was, the book, one of the things they were indicating was this actually had a massive impact on the beginning of throwing off of traditional morality concerning women. Now there's another hadith also that says toward the end of time, not in this one, that men would ride with their women sitting next to them on mayathir, which are like bucket seats. They were high saddles that were used by rich people. But they'd look, if you saw them now, it's like a bucket seat. But the point of the hadith is that he would have his wife next to him. And it said, they would come up, يَقِفُونَ عِنْدَ أَبْوَابِ الْمَسَاجِدِ. They would come right up to the doors of the masjid. And he would go in and pray. And the woman would have nothing on her head. And he said those people were cursed. And the sayyara, the car, is the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he والخيل والبغال والحمير لتركبونها وزينة. Allah created horses and mules and donkeys that you could ride them, and also as an ornament. And then Allah says وَيَخْلُقُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and He creates things that you don't know yet. Other modes of transportation. And so, another one, Ya Salman, عند ذلك يجف الرجل والديه, people will be bad to their parents. ويبر صديقه ويحتقر السنة. He will be righteous towards his friend and cruel towards his parents, and he will belittle the sunnah. He'll belittle the sunnah. يحتقر السنة. And now the sunnah is muhtaqara. In the Muslim world, the sunnah is seen as something insignificant. And they have what they call them the Quraniyun. People that just say that they should follow the Quran and no hadith. And people say, why isn't the Dajjal mentioned in the hadith? And one of the reasons the Dajjal is not mentioned in the Quran, according to some of the scholars, is that it will be a fitna for people that leave the hadith. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that he was given the Quran and like it, which is the Sunnah. And his mutawatir hadith is qat'i. If you don't believe in the mutawatir, it's the same as disbelieving in the Quran. And if you reject the entirety of the sunnah of ahad, singular transmission, which doesn't mean singular 1-1, but not reaching the level of tawatur or absolute certainty, that it's the same as rejecting the tawatur. And then he said, يَكُونُ ذَلِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ قَالَ نَعْمْ يَا سَلْمَانَ عِنْدَ ذَلِكَ تُزَخْرَفَ الْمَسَاجِدِ. You'll see the masajid being built like churches and synagogues. وَتُطَالَ الْمَنَابِرِ. And you'll see the manabir being high. وَتَكْثُرُ الصُّفُوفِ. And you'll see many lines, ranks in the masjid. وَالْقُلُوبُ مُتَبَاغِضَةً. But the hearts will hate each other. So you'll see people in there. وَالْأَلْسُنْ مُخْتَلِفَةً. And the tongues are all differing in their opinions. دِينُ أَحَدِهِمْ لَعْقَى عَلَى لِسَانِهِ. The deen of one of those people will just be on it's like lip service. It's just on his tongue. It's a la'qa. It's not in his heart. إِنْ عُطِيَ شَكَرْ وَإِنْ مُنِعَ كَبَرْ. If he gets things, he's happy and grateful. But if he doesn't, he shows ingratitude. يكون ذلك يا رسول الله قال نعم يا سلمان عندها يغار على الغلام كما يغار على الجارية البكر. In those days, people will lust children, young boys, like they lust a virgin today. And this is massive now, pedophilia. This is massive. It's all over the United States, pedophilia. I mean, unbelievable, these things. وَيُخْطَبُ كَمَا تُخْطَبُ النِّسَاء. And they'll be made proposals to them just like women are proposed to. They have now in the United States a task force in the FBI that searches the internet for people making proposals to young boys. It's on the internet now. Pedophiles that search the internet for young boys and then they try to get them to come meet them and do. وعند ذلك يتحلى ذكور أمتي بالذهب والفضة. You'll see the males of my ummah wearing jewelry of gold and silver. Not rings, but necklaces and bracelets. ويتخذون جلود النمور صفافا عند ذلك يأتي من المشرق والمغرب. Listen very closely. In those days there will come a people من المشرق والمغرب قوم يلون أمتي. They will take over my ummah. فويل لضعيفهم منهم وويل لهم من الله تعالى. There will come a people in the end of time from both the east and the west, and they will have power over my ummah. So woe to the weak of my ummah that follow them. Woe to them. And if you reflect on that hadith, it becomes clear that people that come from the east and the west by the urf of language, the only place that falls in the east and the west now is America. Because the east, in America, you go to Japan, many businessmen go to the Middle East by way of Singapore, Japan, these places. So they actually go by the east. And they also go from New York by the west, so they go both directions by the urf of people. Qawmun, one people, come from the east and the west at the same time. And if you look on a world map, it's very clear that in traditional understanding, Morocco was called al-Maghrib al-Aqsa, the furthest west. And Asia was al-Mashriq al-Aqsa, the furthest east. And they didn't have any idea of something beyond that until we discovered America, and now we have something that falls between the east and the west. What's west of America is the east, and what's east of America is the west. Now, those are the lesser signs. And there are many, many more. People will walk in the marketplaces with their thighs fully exposed, wearing shorts. There are hadith, يُكَلِّمُ الرَّجُلُ فَخِذُهُ. A man's thigh will speak to him. And the Arabs, Allahu A'lam, one of the meaning, the Arabs use something to describe something connected to it. Many people now carry their phones on their thighs. They carry their beepers on their thigh. The Prophet ﷺ said, يُكَلِّمُ الرَّجُلُ شَرَاكُ نَعْلِهِ, the strap of his sandal. But شَرَاكُ النَّعْلِ is also, this is شَرَاكُ النَّعْلِ. In the Arabic language, if you say this much, it means شَرَاكُ النَّعْلِ. Shibr is this much, شَرَاكُ النَّعْلِ is this much. And people who tell somebody to call them, they make this sign like that. You go like that. That's شَرَاكُ النَّعْلِ, like that. And also, if you look at the phone itself, it's in the shape of the thong of a sandal, getting thinner and thinner. Allahu A'lam, it doesn't mean that that's the meaning of the hadith, because it could very well be that somebody will, and there already are phones made out of shoes. In America, you can buy shoe phones. Literally, I'm telling you, you can buy a phone in a design of a shoe in the stores for ikhtilaf al-ahwa, people that like to diversify their design. Now, some things about the Dajjal. Well, I'm going to do the slides now. If maybe the lights could go down. Can I have the first slide? The lights have to go off.
Yeah, he's got somebody down there.
I just want to give an example on this. One of the meanings in Arabic of Dajjal, and I'm a Sunni Muslim, and I believe in the outward of the hadith. I don't like to make interpretation. I mean, I don't have the authority to do that. But I believe in the outward of the hadith, and so I don't think that the Dajjal in its ultimate manifestation is a system, although I think that there is a Dajjalic system. In other words, there is a human being who is a Dajjal. But there's also a system and there's a land, and I'll show that in a second, of the Dajjal. This was a magazine called Life magazine. It's a very popular magazine in America, and it was a series of pictures and statements about religious people. And I want to show you the nature of their Dajjal, because Dajjal in Arabic comes from the root word means to apply pitch or tar. And it's very interesting that in America we have a colloquialism. I don't know if they use it here, but they say the pitchman. And the reason they use that colloquialism is because medicine men used to sell tar to treat all your ailments when they discovered oil. In fact, Rockefeller was a pitchman originally. He used to sell tar. And so they used the pitchman as a con man, a confidence man. All right, so if you look at this is a Hindu, and it looks like he's standing on water. Oh, nice face, beautiful man. You know, they don't tell you that he probably drinks urine and worships, seriously worships idols and things like that, And next one. And then here, the Japanese Shintoism, you can see high-tech, very clean, and there he is in his traditional robe, indicating psychologically to the viewer that here is the blending, Japan's successful blending of the traditional with the modern. The Japanese culture has been successful in maintaining their tradition and yet becoming fully modernized. Right? Again, they don't tell you that they worship ancestors. That's the religion. The next one. Looks like a Muslim there, but not. The Pope is shown here, very devotional person. Next one. And here you have Anglicanism, which is here, right, in England. And this is the Church of England, 56-year-old. He's the Archbishop of Canterbury. Very nice, beautiful robes. He's on the straight and narrow. Obviously, going to paradise, no doubt. And then the next one. And now this one, Luther. He's on top of the world. He's clouds. It looks like a heavenly scene. He just needs wings and a harp. And then next one. And then Dalai Lama, Dalai Lama is a very interesting character. Dalai Lama just was attacked in America for not allowing American Tibetan Buddhists to worship a certain idol that they were worshiping. Not that he worshipped several idols every morning. He said in the article. But he said he used to worship this idol in his early years, and then he realized it was a devil. And so he stopped worshiping it. Right? Well, maybe you'll find out later that the other ones are devils as well. This is the nature, right, of learning. But he prohibited his and so they protest, the Americans, right, freedom of religion. We know we should be allowed to worship even devilish idols. So you can see him there. He's, the Dalai Lama, when he was young, growing up in the monastery in Tibet, he was addicted to Western movies. And I don't know, but I have an inkling of a suspicion that he watched Lionel Barrymore in a very famous film called David Copperfield, where he plays a character named Uriah Heep. And because he imitates that character when he talks and does his thing. And I was just wondering, he might be a joke, his own personal joke on people. He's actually a very witty person. But the point is, here he is, Buddhism, this natural religion in the midst of the Himalayas. You see, the Americans love Buddhism now, but they fail to tell you that the Tibetan Buddhists, when they were in power, outlawed the bicycle, completely against any progress, right? Whatsoever, or quote-unquote progress. But the point is, the Americans are so dead set on making everybody follow their way, but here they raise him up to almost a godlike status in America, really. The intellectuals, movie stars, all these people. And then next one. And here we have the great scholarly tradition of the Jewish people. Here's a rabbi reading his Torah probably, or Talmud, and he's under an olive tree, and it's in the Holy Land, beautiful scene. I don't know where the hat came from. It doesn't look very Middle Eastern to me, but there he is anyway. Next one. And here we have the Muslim. It's very interesting, I mean, if you look at that right there, what is that? I mean, who piled that up there? It's not even it's not even a wall or the beginning of a wall. I mean, they put us in the middle of a garden, and then here this poor man, he's wondering what's going on, and he's it's unbelievable. So you look at the psychological impact of that. You see somebody reading those back and seeing all those religions, the men of God. And then here, our man in the rubble heap, right? I mean, they could have had him in al-Absar, in the oldest university in the world. They could have put that on there. There's a lot of things they could have done, right? They took him out to a garbage dump and said, we want to get a picture of you here, in the midst of rubble. He's probably, I don't know, he probably wasn't aware, because, they're not aware of the sophistication of their propaganda techniques. He just said, let's get several pictures, took them to different places, but that's the one they picked. And that's my point. This is what they do, right? Next one. Now that's the man they don't show. Right? That's my teacher, the Hajj. Next one. Now, Master Mason. This is the founding father of America. You can see the one eye on his robe there. Over there is the G. And this is in the National Archives. He was a Master Mason, 33rd degree. You can see the G there, which some people misleadingly think stands for God. It doesn't. It stands for geometry. And what they believed, the rationalists, was that if we measure everything, we will gain mastery over nature, because God's mastery is determined by the fact that He knows the measurement of everything. That's why they call God the great architect. So they say if we can measure it, and this is why modern Western man set out, and you can read the book, The Measure of Reality, a recent book, which is about this topic of the measuring in the West. Next one. And then this is the Great Seal of the United States. It has two sides. This is one side. You can see, first of all, the Star of David up there, which is composed of 13 stars, but it makes up a Star of David. And then you can see the eagle, shielded, always protected. Right? Those are the vital points. See, because everything else is feathers. But the vital points protected, so this idea of America protecting their vital interests, protecting their vital points. And then you can see here is the symbol of peace, which is the olive branch, symbolizing peace in the hand or the talon of this bird. And the bird is looking towards the direction of the peace, which means that anyone that looks with us will give them peace. But if you look against us, then we give you war. And this is why they have to. I'm not making this up. This is why they said all this stuff. Go ahead, next one. And then, most intriguing thing, the Prophet ﷺ said that every prophet has warned their people against the Dajjal. But I will tell you something about the Dajjal that nobody has told their ummah. He has one eye. And this is very interesting, because one of the words for Dajjal means eye and eyebrow over it. In Arabic, Dajjal means one eye with an eyebrow. And this, if you look at the pyramid here, the pyramid is three-dimensional. It's represented as three-dimensional. But the eye is represented as two-dimensional, which is the nature of monoptic vision. If you only can see out of one eye, you don't have depth perception. Right? An ophthalmologist will tell you that. If you don't have two eyes, you lose depth perception. And so this is what, the one eye has no depth perception. But this, they believe, is the eye of God. That's what they call it, the eye of God. The all-seeing eye of God. They made God one eye. Right? And you can see the eye is suspended above the pyramid, because the Dajjal cannot come until the pyramid, the social structure is complete. The system is put in place for his coming. And the system is secularism. You have to eliminate religion from the realm of governance, from the realm of social behavior. And on the bottom you have, in Roman numerals, you have 1776. Now the Americans use the age of reason is 21, which is the sum of 1776. And they actually believe that 1776 is a symbolic, because they really believe, over here it says, he's pleased with our program, with what we're doing. He's pleased with us. They believe that the age of reason had arrived, that the human beings in the founding of America as a secular state, eliminating religion from politics, was a sign that man was coming to the age of reason. So they actually believe in their, this is all in their books, if you read where this stuff comes from. And then Novus Ordo Seclorum, bad Latin, but it basically means a new worldly order. Secularum in Latin means the world, order of the world, a new world order. It also means a secular order. Secular means world, secular. Next one. Now, this is a very interesting, because when I first saw this, I immediately said, Sadaqa Rasulullah, because the Prophet ﷺ said, يُوشِكُ أَن تَدَعَ عَلَيْكَ مِنَ الْأُمَمِ كَمَا تَدَعَ الْأَكَلَةُ إِلَى قَصَعَتِهَا. It's coming a time when the nations will eat you like they come to a plate of food. It's a hadith, sahih. يُوشِكُ أَن تَدَعَ عَلَيْكَ مِنَ الْأُمَمِ كَمَا تَدَعَ الْأَكَلَةُ إِلَى قَصَعَتِهَا. أَمِنْ قِلَّةٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ كَثِيرٌ. No, you're many. Is it from that we're few in number? No, you're many. Here's the third world, which is the majority of the population of the world. Much of it is Muslim, what they call the third world. And here's a non-Muslim woman, Maria Gallardin, who's seeing it in that image. And our Prophet ﷺ said this 1,400 years ago. Here's a woman now in America seeing that the way America and her allies, GATT, the General Agreement on Terrorist and Trade, that's all the G7 and all these, seeing it like eating the... Now, another example of that. Can you just turn that off for a second? This was done in 1896 by an English, and here's the Ottoman Empire, and again, he's showing the nations coming on it like people come to a feast. Again, clear, they're seeing what our Prophet ﷺ foretold 1,400 years ago. They see it with their own eyes, and there's Muslims that really are unaware of this stuff. So the next slide. Next slide. Oh, there you go. Christmas cheer from Saudi Arabia. The tradition continues as Bob visits the brave men and women serving in Operation Desert Shield. It's the show that made the headlines. Right? Which one is the show? The Desert Shield or Bob? You don't know. You know. And there you have it, right? Ann Jillian, Christina, head of the class, Dolores Hope, Johnny Bench. Nobody knows who he is. Maria Osman, the Pointer Sisters. Right? This is on the Arabian Peninsula, a land that was purified by the Messenger of Allah and his companions. And here you have the lowest of the low. The lowest of the low going there to give Christmas cheer. From next one. There you go. That's what they want. That's all they want. If you do that, they'll be happy with you, I promise. That's what they want from us, right there. That picture says 1,000 words. I don't have to make any comments on that. This was taken out of Newsweek, right? After the Americans saved the day, right? Next one. And if you don't do that, That's what happened. Right? That's an Iraqi soldier. Right? That's what they did, and that's why they're kissing the flag. That's what happened to their Muslim brother. I mean, that, inshallah, that's a shaheed right there. I mean, he even looks like he's got his finger. Takbir! He looks like he's saying shahada. Next one. There it is, the World Wide Web. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that مثل الذين اتخذوا أولياء من دون الله كمثل العنكبوت اتخذ بيتا. Those who take protecting friends other than Allah, they take a system other than Allah's system, are like those who make a spider's web. And surely the weakest of houses is the house of the spider. Here's an advertisement for the net. The cheapest way to attract new customers. The customers are flies. And what are flies attracted to? Crap, because that's what they're selling. Right? That's what it is. And the word in Arabic, Dajjal, or Dajjala, is a group of people spreading feces all over the world. You can look it up in the dictionary. Lisan al-Arab. Look it up. I'm not making this up. Spreading feces all over the world. Dung. And another man, Dajjal, is a group of people selling goods. Right? And so here they are, that's their spider's web, which I'm going to talk about. Well, I mean, it's very interesting. Let's look at the spider's web. In Tech Week, because I live right near the Silicon Valley there, Tech Week, May 4th, 1998. Doomsday fears about Y2K. Some experts say we're in denial about how dangerous the millennial bug really is. This is not a crazy magazine. This is a software engineer's magazine in the Silicon Valley. New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and a dozen other cities are going to resemble Beirut in January 2000. That's why I moved out of New York City to rural New Mexico a couple of months ago. The government of the U.S. as we currently know it will fall on 1/1/2000, period. That's computer programming guru Ed Jordan talking, and he's one of the more conservative Y2K experts. There's a growing alarm in the computer programming circles about what is seen as the abysmal failure out of hubris or greed, or both, of American business and government to take the Y2K crisis seriously enough. Small but significant numbers of concerned citizens, Tech Week has learned, are beginning to act on those ominous predictions and are heading for shelter and self-defense. Stockpiling supplies, hunkering down, and preparing what they see is an apocalypse fostered by our total reliance on التكلان. If you translate that in Arabic, التكلان or التوكل المطلق على التكنولوجيا. Right? Absolute dependence on technology. A flawed system. None of the mission-critical sectors in the United States are even close to being Y2K compliant, say the experts. Not 9,000 electric utility plants, not the 11,000 banks, not the telecommunications companies, and certainly not U.S. governments, which is way behind in its Y2K fixes. The April 28th FCC chairman, William Kenner, told the Senate's Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation he was concerned that the year 2000 problem had the potential of disrupting communication services worldwide. Every sector of communications industry, broadcast, cable, radio, satellite, wireline, and wireless telephone could be affected. Right? And then here, the IRS, speaking also before the Senate, IRS commissioner in the Wall Street Journal on April 22nd said, 21 months from now, there could be 90 million taxpayers who won't get their refunds. If we don't fix the century date problem, we will have a situation scarier than the average disaster movie you might see on Sunday night. Okay? I think the point of that is, and then in here he says signs to look for: CEOs who start abandoning their companies. Then the Y2K programmers will realize they're on a death march culminating in the great geek migration. Programmers will have to decide, how long do I stay and make the big bucks? Then here, financial consultant Gary North responds, in Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, where 80% of the world's code is, it can all be solved if American programmers just stay on the job in large cities and if the COBOL ferry shows up on time. That's why it's naive to believe that Y2K will be fixed. Y2K is a systemic problem. It cannot be solved. Why stay on the deck of a sinking ship if you can get off? Now, other signs, dates that are important: August 22nd, 1999, GPS global positioning system rollover reset to 0. All the planes that use the GPS system roll over because they were done by the Navy with 1,054 weeks, which ends in 1999, August 22nd. Now, Allahu Alam, I really don't know, but the point is they're very concerned about this problem. They're concerned about it in England as well. Some of them say that it's just a time bomb that's ticking away because they've already done simulated testing of several of the electrical companies in America, and the infrastructure is too vast for them to deal with the issue in time. And when they click it over to 00, they get a crash of the system. And also the nuclear plants, they're very concerned about that. So this is just an indication for us that how weak and flimsy this system is. Because just if this is true, and I don't know it is, and I'm not saying it is, I asked 30 software engineers the other night in California, and they had differing opinions. Some of them said, it's too big, we can't deal with it, the system's going to crash. Others said, we'll just have to wait and see, we don't really know what's going to happen. But nobody said, no, there's no problem whatsoever. There is a problem. The year 2000 bug was a serious bug. And I think it's interesting that they call it a bug, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you know that Allah is not ashamed to use even the least thing in His creation as a metaphor. And ba'uda is a baq in the tafsir, it's a bug. You know, I mean, Allah can use, here is a whole system that they are worrying at the theoretical level that it could be brought down by 2 bytes. If you know computer language, 2 bytes. There's 2 bytes in there. They didn't put 19, so they can flip over to 2000. To save space, they put two instead of 4. And so dates read 1, 1, and then 6, 2, 6, 3, 6, 4, 6, 5. When you get to 1999, it flips over. And in America, it's already started to happen that people that are over 100 have been getting kindergarten calls to go to school. Like one lady was 104, and she got a notice to report to kindergarten. Right? So seriously, it's a problem. Now, I'll just give you a scenario here. The worst affected place, only in the UK, I know that they're I think 16% of their companies are Y2K compliable right now. But in America, less than 10% of the banks are. And the system is massive. I called personally one of the largest banks in America, Bank of America, and I asked them if they were Y2K compliant. And he said, yes. And I said, can you give me something in writing? And he said, hold on. He came back 5 minutes later, and he said, I just spoke with the supervisor, and they said, we're working on it. And we don't have anything in writing as of yet. Right? Now, I don't find it incredulous to see a run on the banks when people start realizing if they don't solve this problem in 1999, people actually start saying, hey, let's get our money out of the bank. Well, there goes the con game, because there is no money in the bank. There's no money in the bank. Don't think there's any money in the bank. The whole banking system is based on nobody pulls their money out. It's just small increments. If everybody makes a run on the bank, they have to close the banks. If they close the banks, there's a crisis. And it's a crisis of confidence. That's where the crisis lies. It's not that they couldn't just print up the money. Nobody trusts them anymore. And so there's a very potential crisis here very soon in these societies. And all I can say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wages war on riba. In the Quran, He announced war only on riba, and in the Hadith, only on those who fight His righteous people. Allah and His Messenger, فَأْذِنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. The announced of a war from Allah and His Messenger. The whole financial system is based on this riba. Shaykh Muhammad Ali Sabuni just recently wrote a book on the danger of the global system of usury and the danger of having a war from Allah and His Messenger on humanity. And one of the hadiths at the end of time is that the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيَأْتِيَنَّ عَلَى النَّاسِ زَمَانٍ كُلُّهُمْ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا. There's coming a time for people, all of them will be devouring usury, and those who don't devour it will be covered in its dust. يُصَابُ بِغُبَارٍ, covered in its dust. So they've created a worldwide web. It's a Bayt al-Ankabut. That's what they call it. In Arabic, worldwide web is al-Bayt al-Ankabut al-Alami. And Allah says it's the flimsiest of houses. Another thing that is very possible scenario is any close meteor to the earth that creates a strong magnetic field can completely destroy all of their computer systems. In other words, you have to realize that their power is very, very flimsy. It's just like that web. That's their problem. All of their guided missiles, all of their tanks, it's all computerized technology now. All of it. If the Muslims, as a people, if they were attacked like man to man, you see, they can defend themselves. It's only when you bomb them with neutron bombs and fire bombs from the sky, which is interesting because in the Christian text, it says one of the signs that the Antichrist has is that he can throw fire down from the sky on anyone who goes against him. Okay. So next one. This is just good advertisement. This is what they want. Control everything, everywhere. Right? That's it, right there. And do it through all these, this World Wide Web system. Next one. World Wide Web. They see it themselves. Next one. There's a hadith in the end of time. كلهم ذئاب والذي ليس بذئب تأكله الذئاب. There's coming a time when all of them are wolves, and the one who's not a wolf is eaten by the wolves. And it's just interesting that this is an advertisement in which they're literally encouraging you to behave like a wolf, to make a killing in sales. And these are their metaphors. There's no shame. This is how you do trading. And if you study the trading of the Europeans and the Americans, they have always traded by imposing. You see, Commander Perry of the Americans opened up Japan and forced them to buy American goods. The Opium Wars from this country, they went with gunboats and forced the Chinese to buy their opium that they were producing. Forced them by gunboat. Gunboat diplomacy, this is how they do things. Next one. Again, the signs, I'm not saying television is a Dajjal. I don't think it's the Dajjal, but it is a Dajjal. And it's a very brilliant one because, next one. Now this is just an artist rendition of Europe coming of, when they finally get their act together. Again, signs, artists, seeing things. Next one. There's something goes with that, but I decided not to. Next one. This is an interesting picture of great rhetorician, Zaghloul Basha. He was the head of the Wafd party in Egypt. The point of this is that here you have, in the last century, the Muslims already beardless, you see, beardless, all with their ties, and now they still have the tarbush. They took off the turban, but the tarbush was still there. And this is what happened to the Ummah. The Prophet ﷺ said that تَبِعَنَّ سَنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ ذِرَاعًا بِذِرَاعٍ حَتَّى لَوْ سَلَكُوا جَحْرَ ضَبٍّ لَسَلَكْتُمُوهُ. There's coming a time that you'll follow the ways of the Jews and the Christians by handspan, arm length by arm length, to the point where if they go down a lizard's hole, you will go down it too. Al-Iyad said that it means imitating their ways, their dress, the way they eat, the way they... And so this was the beginning of the loss of a Muslim identity and a desire to look like the conqueror. And this is something Albert Memmi in his book, The Colonizer and the Colonized, said, what happens to the colonized mentality is to be becomes to be like. In other words, we want to be like those who colonized us because they see in them a power and they think that by imitating them they'll get that power. Next, commanding their parents, giving them orders, telling them what to do, which is a very common phenomenon you see now in grocery stores and things like that. Children literally dictating to their parents things, and also just gross rebellion against the parents. But also it indicates, according to Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, a gross disequilibrium in the societies. In other words, everything's turned upside down. The noble people become the low people become the high people. Everything is just disequilibrium. But then he said that you will see the Hufat al-Qurrat, Ri'a al-Sha, yatatawaluna fil bunyan. And in a riwayat, they asked him, who are these people? They're the naked, the destitute, the shepherds, and the camel herders will begin to build tall buildings. And they said, who were they? And he said, the Arabs. Now, this is Abu Dhabi in 1962. And this is the same exact location in 1970, this is 1966, and this is 1981. Same place. Now the point being, this was how Abu Dhabi was for centuries. And then suddenly, in our lifetime, you're seeing yatatawaluna fil bunyan. And I personally was in a car in the Emirates, and there was a building, there were stories being added onto it, an old building. And I said, what was happening there? And he said, so-and-so built a building, and then another sheikh came and built one taller than his, and he got mad, so he's adding layers onto it to make it taller than the other one. And yatatawaluna means to vie in making tall buildings. But another meaning of it in Ibn Manzur's Lisan al-Arab is to tear down and rebuild, tear down and rebuild again and again. And this you can see going on all over the world. There's constant, they build roads, then they're too small, they tear them down, build them again. They build buildings, population goes up, they have to tear them down. It's going on all over. Airports being reinvigorated. Next one. Now, this is, I think, a very interesting picture. It's a satellite photograph of Europe. You can see Italy there. Here we are, England. And this is looking from the sky down at the earth. Now, what struck me about this picture was that the sky, the earth has become like the sky, which is one of the signs of the end of time, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the earth would become, would have zina, right? إِذَا زُخْرِفَتَ الْأَرْضُ وَزَيَّنَتْ. When the earth is ornamented and zina, it gets zina. وَظَنَّ أَهْلُهَا أَنَّهُمْ قَادِرُونَ عَلَيْهَا. And its people think that they have power over the earth, the dominion over the earth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will then, His affair will come. And when it comes, there's no holding it back. It comes by night or by day, laylan aw nahara. Al-Umari radiyallahu anhu said, laylan aw naharan, depending on where you are on the earth. But some places it would be night, some places it would be day. And so this is, I think that's a really interesting. The other sign is that it says in the Quran, إِذَا النُّجُومُ طُمِسَتْ, when the stars are put out of the sky. Al-Umari rahimahullah said that also was something that happened in the world before. Now, because of the massive electrical lights all over Europe, the stars are no longer seen at night. They've been put out by these lights themselves. So the night sky is no longer visible. In fact, astronomers have complained about, next one. That's it. So, now, what time is it?
29, 25 to 9.
But we've been going a long time here.
About 9. Yes, we've got another 25 minutes. We've got questions.
Yeah, I want to go through, I didn't really get to some, it's a long discussion, but what I wanted to do was look at what we should be doing as Muslims given this scenario. The first thing I want to mention that we have what's called a lot of ikhtilaf now, differences of opinions. And I've looked at the different ikhtilafat, and I think they can be summed down to some basic differences. One of the dominant differences amongst practicing Muslims is the difference between those who believe that we should be following traditional scholars' interpretations of the Quran, and those who feel no, that we have to go directly to the source text themselves. This is a source of ikhtilaf. And you have it, people who follow madhab, for instance, and people who are opposed to following madhab. And this has created an ikhtilaf. What I would say about that, one, I think part of the trouble is that because there's such a dearth of scholars now in the ummah generally, there's a lot of confusion. And I think what has to be recognized is that generally there are many sincere Muslims who are actively striving to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's intentions in His revelation. And some of those people are following madhab, and some of them are not following madhab. What I would say is I think that the movement against madhab has had some negative and positive effects, just like the people who follow madhab have had negative and positive aspects. From the positive effects is that they have forced the people who are following madhab to examine their own understanding closer, to look at dalils, to think about the Quran and the Hadith. And while there's a danger inherent in that a person who is not of that level of scholarship where they can do that with any wisdom, that's the danger that lies. But nonetheless, it's even forced scholars to have to begin to write their books using proofs and things. So there are some positive things about that, and there's been a reinvigoration in other aspects that have resulted in that. On the other hand, some of the more necessary, and I'm doing this, it's like I don't want to offend anybody. This is I'm putting things out from my own personal experiences. On the other hand, one of the dangers and the sad things is that there's been a lot of attacking and takfir and tasfiq and tabdi' of people, of saying this person's a fasiq or a mubtada'. And one of the things that the ulama said is that every group always calls groups that disagree with them mubtada'. It's well known in hadith methodology. So whenever a person was accused of being a mubtada', the muhaddithun would actually have to look and make sure that it just wasn't people that didn't like them that were saying that. So one has to understand that. How that can be resolved, I think generally the resolution comes as people's knowledge broadens from both points of view. You have ignorant people who follow madhab who become obstinate about their own position. For instance, there's many people that Hanafi, madhab, or nothing. And if you don't do the dua after the Jumu'ah khutbah, it's a bid'ah. And then there's people who say that the dua after the khutbah is a bid'ah. And then you have people, this just happened recently in California, that's why I'm mentioning it. There was an argument because the imam didn't do the dua after, he was a guest imam, and there were some people who were Hanafi said, do the dua. And then somebody got up and said, it's a bid'ah, don't do it. And again, this is a common occurrence in our masjids. What I would say about that, the most important, and if you get one thing from tonight, the most important thing we all have to remember is that our ummah has many different understandings, and many of them are valid, and many of them are not. But if the ummah disagrees on a matter at a scholastic level, and disagreement is recognized as a valid disagreement, it is prohibited to condemn it. It is prohibited to condemn it. The Maliki scholars consider it a bid'ah makruha to do the dua after the prayer. The Hanafi and the Shafi'i scholars consider it to be permissible because of that difference of opinion. And even the Malikis would say you can't condemn it because it's only at the level of makruh. It's not muharram. And the makruh is not condemned. You can encourage somebody to leave the makruh, but you cannot condemn them and attack them for doing the makruh because there's no punishment attached to it. So people have to be aware of that. We need to gain a broader understanding of our teaching and become more tolerant of each other at both levels. Those who are following madhab need to recognize that we are in an age where there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of misunderstanding, but there are many sincere people struggling to find what the truth is. We need to be patient with each other. Those who are not following madhab have to recognize also that the people who follow madhab are following an unbroken chain of tradition in this ummah for the last 1200 years. That we have no scholars that in the history of Sunni Islam that do not have one of the four imams after their name, including Ibn Taymiyyah al-Hanbali rahimahullah, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah al-Hanbali rahimahullah, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah. These in their book, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says in his fatwa many times, قال إمامنا, our imam, meaning Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So and then also Imam Ahmad himself said, من قلة علم المرء أن يقلد غيره في دينه. From the small amount of knowledge that a man imitates another man in his religion. And that is used often as a proof against people who are following their imams. And actually it's a proof against people who aren't following the imam if they don't have enough knowledge. If you are a mujtahid, then you must follow the Quran and the Sunnah without recourse to the opinions of men. If you have not reached the level of mujtahid, then you fall under the category in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people who know if you yourselves don't know. The next difference that we find very common is between the Sufiya and the Fuqaha, broad strokes. We don't really have real Sufiya anymore, and we don't really have real Fuqaha, and so it's now become a moot point. You get people fighting over, whether you should celebrate Mawlid, whether you shouldn't celebrate Mawlid, and Tasawwuf, anybody who does a serious study of Islam has to recognize that Tasawwuf as a science is one of the sciences of Islam. If you get into tariqah and following sheikhs and these type of things, I think you're going to get into differences of opinions amongst people and you get into a lot of ikhtilaf. But there should be no ikhtilaf over the question of tasawwuf that is based on the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is the tasawwuf of Imam al-Junayd, who said, our science, tasawwuf, is completely embedded in the book and the Sunnah, so anything you see that is not in accordance with the book and the Sunnah, that we don't accept it. Now, I think it's also important to recognize that in many Muslim countries, the people of the doubt that there have been many innovations that have crept in to many places. There's no doubt about that, and it would be both naive and irresponsible to deny that. But if you go in the Muslim world and look, you will find many people who, quote-unquote, say that they're Sufiya, that really the masters of the science of Tasawwuf, like Imam al-Nawawi, who wrote a book on it called Bustan al-Arifin, or Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, who wrote Madarij al-Salikin, or Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, or many of the great teachers and practitioners, Imam al-Qushayri, and others, would completely reject those. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq, who was a reformer within the science, condemns many of the things. But again, one has to be very careful of condemning things that one doesn't understand. Because Musa alayhi salam was rebuked by Al-Khidr because he condemned things that he did not understand. And there could be things that you don't understand that really it's because you don't understand it. And when they're explained to you, they make sense. So if you see something, it's important to ask, what exactly do you mean by that? And there are many statements within the books of Tasawwuf that the outward of them is very strange. But if you look at what the people who commented on them said, the explanations become clear. And there are other things that have to be rejected outright that are in the books of Tasawwuf. And there are many weak hadiths that have been pointed out and other things. So that's an issue. But again, المجمع عليه لا ينكر إلا المجمع عليه. Do not condemn except what is agreed upon to condemn. And then another problem, ikhtilaf, is al-harakiyun versus the la harakiyun. People of haraka, people who want to see social change, who recognize that Islam is a vehicle for social change, and other people within the ummah who condemn the idea of changing things through haraka or movement-based type things. And in this category, you get many different, like people who believe in the methodology of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the methodology of Hizb al-Tahrir, of many groups. And I think what happens is there's no doubt that the impulse from which these groups arise is an impulse that is rooted in the desire to change the social conditions. Whether the methodology is correct is something that is up for debate. That's where the debate arises. But the source and the desire for change is there rooted in the Muslims. Muslims want change. We are not content with the social conditions. And there have been different methodologies. Jama'at al-Islamiyya in Pakistan, Tabligh al-Jama'ah in India and other places. These were methodologies that were set out to try to change certain social conditions. One has to recognize, I think, first and foremost, that there are many sincere people working within those organizations that believe in Islam, that want to see Islam becoming once again defined. And so again, and the people within those groups also have to recognize the inherent wariness of any types of groups, that what happens, the most common sickness of any group is what's called the us-them phenomenon. If you enter into a group, whether it's a Sufi tariqa or a political movement or any type of group, you can easily fall into a group mentality when you have an in-group and an out-group. The in-group is on the right path and the out-group is on the wrong path. The trouble comes when you have a minority movement in Islam that defines itself as the in-group and defines not only the other Muslims, but the kuffar as well as the out-group. So there are Muslims that get alienated by that. So if you're not part of the party or not following the party line, then you're not with the program. And if you're not with the program, you're not really dedicated to Islam. And this is often revealed in the way people speak. And it's a danger. You know, people that say, do you go out fi sabilillah? And the idea is one type of going out fi sabilillah, when subhanallah kathira, like Imam Malik said, there are many ways to go out in the path of Allah. But there are some people that think there's one way, and that becomes a danger and leads to division and splitting amongst the Muslims. Another very powerful source of ikhtilaf amongst the Muslims is those who have the name of Islam by birth, but they really don't have a commitment to Islam, as opposed to those who have the name of Islam, whether by birth or conversion, and yet they have a commitment to Islam. That commitment varies. For some, it's limited. For others, it's their whole life. That's their life commitment. This is a big problem. This is a source of major division in the Muslim world now. People who are secularized, who no longer see, or they think that the rules of Islam are no longer valid, and things like this. And you fall into often really either in kufr or right on the edge of kufr in situations like that. And I don't see a resolution for that type of problem. Another one is between the elect of the Muslims, whether it's governance or wealth, and the impoverished Muslims, and also the disempowered and disenfranchised Muslims. This is a great source of conflict in our communities. So there are in the Muslim world, and again, that can only be solved by the reinstitution of zakat as a practice in which the poor people get their rights from the wealthy people, and by the humility of the wealthy people towards the poor people, and by the lack of envy and resentment within the poor people towards the rich people. So these are deep spiritual crises that need to be looked at. Another source of conflict is between the Arab and the Ajam. The Arabs, as a people, have their own internecine warfare going on. In other words, the Arabs as a people have divisions and splits, and there's a lot of nationalism. But there's a greater issue here, which is the trouble between, in masjids, the Pakistani and the Arab masjid, which is common. I don't know about here, but in America, it becomes a common problem. So the Pakistanis who are often, we do it this way back home, and the Arabs who know we do it this way back home, and then the convert is left just scratching his head. He's neither Brahmi or Bandi or nothing, right? He's just a convert to Islam. And he doesn't understand the sociological background to these things, right? So this is a big conflict. And we have a unique opportunity as immigrants and converts in the West at bridging gaps that are incredibly important. In other words, we need to really practice and not simply give lip service to the fact that Islam does unite people in a brotherhood. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Believers are brothers. And we're a big family. And you have family members who are Arab, who are Pakistani, who are Indian, who are Malaysian, Indonesian, Turkic, American, English, French, German, every place on the earth, Nigerian, the whole spectrum. And Allah made us a family, and we have to respect that. And we have to respect those kinship bonds of Iman. And I'll tell you an amazing, you probably know this, but I think it's an amazing secret. The moment that your parents die, if they died in disbelief, you are not allowed to pray for them in Sharia. And the reason for that is because at the moment of death, the bonds of blood are meaningless. And the only bond of any importance is the bond of Iman. And as we're lowered down in our grave, our brothers and our sisters are the brothers and sisters of Iman. Those are the people that you will be raised up with as a family. It's not the people that you might have been directly related to by blood, and yet there was no Iman to bind you. Because the blood bonds are earthly. Just as we came from the earth, we go back to the earth. But the bonds of Iman are eternal. And that's a really important thing to remember. So the Arab and the Ajam have to recognize you're dealing with different sociological backgrounds. The Prophet ﷺ gave people their due. He did not treat the Bedouin like he treated the Hadari Arabs, because he recognized they had a different sociological makeup. They grew up in a different environment. The Bedouin Arabs, they used to yank him, yank his coat. He would smile at them. If a Hadari Arab did that, it would be completely unacceptable. But he recognized there was a harshness in the desert Arabs, and yet he was still gentle with them. We have to recognize some of our brothers have harshness in them. Some of us. And it comes to all of us. And if I become harsh, then I need my brothers, one, to give me some reflection, but in a way of nasiha, in a way encouraging me to change, not in a way of... And one of the things you often find in masjids is the raising of voices, the fighting, and this is one of the signs of the end of time. Rafa' aswat bil masajid, raising the voices in the masjid, the commentary, bil ikhtilaf, by differences. And then you have Arab, which is a big problem. And we need to get out of the stereotypical attacks on all Palestinians are like that, Egyptians are all like that, Yemenis are, like this stereotypical. There's always truth in stereotypes. But if it becomes the way in which you look at people, you do not allow for the possibility of seeing the salihin from that people. And Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said, every group of people has bad qualities. And if you meet a man from that people who is free of those bad qualities, know that you're with a salih. And the point is that you want to seek out the salihin. And if it's an Egyptian salih, he will be free from those qualities in the Egyptian society that are they're not good qualities. If he's an American salih, it'll be the same. If he's a Yemeni salih, it'll be the same. But you have to recognize every community has their people. And for the fault of the Muslims, we should try our best to lower our eyes. There are obviously many subtypes that go into that. But we need, given the time that we're living in, the age that we're living in, as an ummah, we have to start coming together. Imam Suyuti, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and Imam Sha'rani all said that this ummah would come to a close by the end of the 15th century. We're in over 1530 by the Bi'tha point, and 1419 by the migration point, the hijrah. And really the signs are very clear, and we need to unite as an ummah. We have a great deal of enemies, and we have to stop making enemies of ourselves. And we need to really begin to excuse each other and take this to heart. If everybody in this auditorium did that, you would be a transforming element in your own communities. But this is based on mujahada within our own selves. We have to struggle against our own self. We have to begin to unite on broad-based principles. We have to begin to overlook at this stage in the game. If the house is burning down and the man's handing you a bucket, you don't say you follow a madhab or not. You take the bucket and you pass it down the line. And Dar al-Islam is on fire. And we need to put out the fire and get our house in shape. Really, we need to put our house in shape. And every brick we're trying to put on, we've got a million enemies trying to pull it off. right? So we need to work together instead of each other, taking the brick of another and throwing it down, and recognizing that Islam is a universal tradition. It encompasses many, many views and viewpoints, and our Prophet taught tolerance, and he taught different ways of viewing things. And the other thing that I would say is, in many ways, the West is being given to us. It's being given to us. The Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, the only thing that he wanted was to be able to speak freely. In these countries, we can still speak. We can go out and talk to people. We can call people to Islam. But if we're calling them to that rubbish bin in the picture, it's just not a very appealing picture. I mean, we should be calling them to those other pictures. The straight and narrow, the beautiful natural fitra nature of Islam. And if we do that, people will respond. So my plea to myself and to all of us is really, as individuals, to make a commitment. The Prophet ﷺ said, if the Dajjal comes now, I will protect you. But if I'm gone and he comes, each one of you must protect himself. And we have to protect ourselves against the divide and conquer mentality of the dominant cultures that are opposing us and attacking us.
Okay, inshallah, we'll be breaking for Salat al-Maghrib, which I think the time starts about 9:15, if I'm correct. We have somebody who would like to take Shahada, I believe. Shaykh Hamza? Yeah? So whoever it is who would like to take the Shahada, please.
Oh, they don't have to come.
No?
They want to see it after.
Afterwards, okay. We'll make some time afterwards, inshallah. Okay, brother wants to talk.
What's your name? My real brother. My Alhamdulillah. We have a brother to be, inshallah, who wants to say Shahada, leaving Hinduism and embracing Islam, alhamdulillah. So this is the blessing of Islam, wallahi. And this is a proof of the message of Islam, and this is India and Pakistan are dropping atomic bombs, right? Dropping atomic bombs now, right? And the truth is that all of the crises, it has nothing to do with religion, or it's all just hubris and pride and arrogance and all of these diseases of the heart. That's what it's about. And if we had taken the message when we ruled India to the people that were living there, India would be a Muslim country. And there are many sociological reasons why Muslims did not do that we should be ashamed of. But this is a good thing, inshallah. So the brother's going to say the Shahada. And so just we'll give the Shahada. Just repeat after me. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
Okay, we'll take a break for just a couple of things before we do. The brother's room for prayer is room 10, which is just through these doors. Okay, and for the sisters, it's room 11, which is just on my right-hand side, next to room 10. Also, the Kalam magazine is on sale, which is special price for right now, and there's food as well, which is depending on making donations.
there's also a hadith that I fear more for you than the Dajjal al-Riyah, which is showing off hidden shirk. So, I mean, the Dajjal, from one point of view, if you know your deen, he's going to be clear. If you don't know your deen, you'll get misled by him. And some aspects of the Dajjal that are important is that the Prophet ﷺ said if the Dajjal came today, the children of Medina would chase him out with their sandals. Ibn Abbas. And the Prophet ﷺ said if he came today, that he would not be a problem because his ummah, they were all knowledgeable. Towards the end of time, one of the things that I didn't mention that I wanted to was knowledge is taken away. And the Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih al-Bukhari that he said that knowledge is not seized suddenly, but it's seized by the death of the scholars, people of knowledge. And then he said, until the point where people take ignorant people as their scholars, so they ask them for fatwa, and they give them fatwa without knowledge, so they go astray and lead others astray. The facts presented so far disheartening for me. What is the most effective thing to do? They are disheartening. On the other hand, and the time went so quick that I didn't really get to where I wanted to go. But they get, what's happening right now, I think, Allahu Alam, is that we're being prepared for some major events. And I didn't get to those. I wanted to get to the signs that haven't come yet. And one of the signs that hasn't come yet is the Mahdi, and the Prophet ﷺ, the Mahdi is mutawatir ma'nawi. The coming of the Mahdi is mutawatir. And there will be a Muslim leader who is going to, he'll first take the Arabian Peninsula, and then he'll take Persia, and then he'll take Constantinople. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the Muslims would take Constantinople right before the hour the Dajjal comes. They'll take it with takbir, just saying Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. And to me that's an indication that they're already Muslims. They just need to be reminded. In other words, if an army shows up, I think the Turkish people are ready to go. And another thing to mention about the Turks is that according to the New World Order's, one of their main ideologues, Samuel Huntington, the country they fear more than any other country in the Muslim world is Turkey. And in fact, Zbigniew Brzezinski is saying that that the Europeans should allow the Turks into the common market. They're pushing for that because they think that in a sense if they give them these crumbs of Europe, that they'll forget about their Islam. And so they're actually very worried about what they call a core state. They say that the West has core states. They have England and Germany are their core states right now, and France and England. And they say that the Muslims have no core state. They don't have a core state that represents their civilization. And they're not really worried about Saudi Arabia because it just doesn't have what it takes to be a core state in terms of military power, population, historical precedent, and many other things. Whereas Turkey does. It has all of the qualities. So they're actually very worried about Turkey. And this is why they're coming down hard. And the government, the military in Turkey has been the bastion of secularism. And in recent years, there's been a really awakening amongst the Turkish people towards their roots and their greatness, because it's their natural greatness. So, and the same is true of Egypt, with the exception that Egypt is such an impoverished state right now. But they're very fearful of Egypt also. Egypt is the population of Egypt is massive. It's a highly educated country, but it doesn't have the military nor the economic resources. Some people say there's no ijtihad on the issue of re-establishing the Khilafah. Is this true? The reality never existed during the classical era, and so there's no ijtihad from our imams of the past. The Khilafah is a fard kifaya. It's supposed to be fulfilled. Although unlike other fard kifaya, the ulama say that it's not an incumbent on every individual Muslim when it's not being fulfilled. that's Mawardi's opinion, and it's the opinion of the Maliki scholars that I know, and I don't know if there's any khilaf about that. There might be a khilaf, but what I was taught, my understanding is that the people who are called Ahlul Hal wal Aqad are responsible for establishing the khilaf, and those are the ulama and the notables in the community. And if they don't do it, and according to the Maliki scholars, there's basically 3 ways that you bring about a khilafah. One is by shura of Ahlul Hal wal Aqad, which is obviously a good way, if not the best way, and the other is by an appointment of the previous Khalifa, which can be by inheritance, and this is what Bani Umayyah did. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he took it from a Khilafah ala minhaj al-Nabuwah, which was that Allah would allow the Khalifa to emerge like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu without a special appointment, only with Ishara, and he made his son Yazid Khalifa, and he did it as an ijtihad. I mean, his intention was good. That's our opinion. That's the Sunni position. But the point being, and then the other type is what they call mutaghallib, who is somebody who takes a sword and says, anybody goes against me, I'll chop their head off. And the Muslims are, unfortunately, in that type of condition. If it does happen, they are commanded to sama' wa ta'a, because fighting, if he really does have power, to fight him would result in a greater fitna, which is killing Muslims, which should be avoided, in any situation, unless it's al-fi'a al-baghiya, فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. Imam Mahdi will appear during Ramadan, where a moon-sun eclipse occurred in the same month. Its research indicates this in the year 2004. There are some hadiths that indicate that nobody can say for sure. You can't give any dates. Anybody gives you any dates, we just can't take them. Imam Suyuti said that the ajal of the ummah would end sometime in the 15th century. He based it on a hadith that indicates that this ummah lasts, is half of the life of the Jewish ummah, and they lasted 2,000 years, and so the ummah would only last 1,000 years, which is why we had our own millennial fever 400 years ago, because people really thought that it was all coming to an end. And Imam Suyuti, who was born in the 10th century and lived into the 11th century, so he obviously passed the 1,000-year mark, wrote a fatwa called Al-Kish, أن الأمة تتجاوز الألف, insight into the fact that the ummah will last more than 1,000 years, because he actually said, look, we're all alive and it's been over 1,000 years. But what he said is that it only was 1,000 years, but there's a dua of the Prophet in which he said, oh Allah, give my ummah an extra half day. And somebody asked him, how long would that be? And he said, 500 years, because a day with Allah is 1,000 years. And so he said it wouldn't go past 1,500 years, which means we have about 70 years left. And Allah knows best. That's not the Sa'ah, because the Sa'ah comes after the Ummah, the Prophet. The Ummah is finished, and the Sa'ah comes on the worst people. There's no Muslims left. لَمْ يَبْقَ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَنْ يَقُولُ اللَّهُ اللَّهُ. Nobody left on the earth who says Allah, Allah, or La ilaha illallah. So that's not the Sa'ah. So, and then anyone who claims to be the Mahdi is not the Mahdi. Anyone who says I'm the Mahdi, he's not the Mahdi, because the Mahdi actually doesn't want bay'ah. He'll take bay'ah in Mecca at the Rukn, and people will say nubay'uka, and he says, I don't want bay'ah, I'm nobody, I don't want it, and they force him. And then, according to the hadith, an army of Europeans will come towards Mecca to stop him, and they'll be swallowed in the desert. Some kind of khasf, like what happened to Iram, right? Iram was just swallowed up, and they finally proved it. They didn't used to believe. If you look at the old books by the Orientals, they say Iram's just a folklore. It's folklore in the Quran. And then the satellite, the NASA satellite that was doing pictures of the Gulf, actually saw the trails leading to the city Iram, because they discovered in Erbil in Syria in the 1940s references to Iram, to a city called Iram.
And then they realized it was in Oman, and they actually did the computer analyses and found them. And they went there, did excavation, and found that the city had, in fact, just as the Qur'an said, that it had been, it was seized. So, what is traditional Islamic method of educating the masses? Traditionally, I think the Muslims tended to have a fard ayn, education for everybody, that there's a fard ayn which involves 6 things that everybody should have. Everybody should know their aqidah, a basic creed in Islam, like Imam Tahawi's creed. And I would say about creeds, traditionally the Muslims were not a creed-based ummah in that they did not like to delve into speculative theology. They had very simple creeds, unlike the Christians, who their whole obsession was theology and no law. Muslims were fiqh-based people who did not place a lot of emphasis on going into creeds. You just learn a simple creed like Imam Tahawi. Don't go into, and this is where a lot of khilaf comes up, because people start saying, you know, does the Prophet know this? Does he know that? This, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you lead to branches of branches that just create dissension and things. So people just learn a simple creed, and that's it. And then don't discuss the matter. Know what you believe and don't discuss it. And then in terms of educating the Muslims, I mean, it's important that we do educate every Muslim at that fard ayn level, and then they have to have basic fiqh of their fard ayn, which is salah, tahara, salah, zakah, hajj, Ramadan, and then they also need to learn akhlaq al-munjiyah, the character that saves us, and character and the al-muhlika, things that harm us, in order to purify ourselves from hasad, from ghibah, from namima, from bad characters, and to ornament ourselves with good character like amana, trust, and charity, and all of these things. And then you learn to need the basic rules of halal and haram, knowing the ma'lum min ad-din bil-darura, and know also the basic rules of marriage if you're going to get married, and divorce also. And then know also the how to earn a halal livelihood. Somebody said, what was the significance of the year the first Dajjal dollar bill was first printed? 1933, as far as I know, was the first year, but the Great Seal has been there for a long time. That was first put on the dollar during the administration of Roosevelt, and I don't know why they put it there. Mason's like 33 as a number. I'm sure I'm sure you do not equate the Prophet ﷺ with Allah. How then can you equate the words of Allah, the Quran, with the words of the Prophet? Because Allah says, مَا يَنْتَقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. He doesn't speak from his own desire. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. So the Quran itself says that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't speak from his own desire. So we do not say that the hadith is uncreated like the Quran. But we do believe that the hadith is part of the revelation. It's inspired. The Prophet ﷺ is inspired to say what he says. Alright, so I'm not in any way equating the Prophet ﷺ hasha with Allah, nor am I saying that his hadith can be read in salah or something like that. Even the hadith Qudsi, you can't read in salah. So the Quran has its own unique status. The point is that you cannot say that there's only the Quran and no hadith. وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. What the Prophet gave you, take it, and what he prohibited you to do. It doesn't say وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الْقُرْآنُ فَخُذُوهُ. Even though that's a command in the Quran as well. Allah commands us to follow the Quran. But I'm saying in that ayah, Allah didn't say follow only the Quran. He said follow the messenger of Allah. And also many ayahs in the Quran indicate that we sent down a light and a rahmah, nur wa rahmah. And the rahmah is the Prophet ﷺ. So he's part of the revelation. You can't separate him from it. And we say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. That's tawheed. If you only say La ilaha illallah, you're not a muwahid, even though it's tawheed. You're not a muwahid. You have to complete it by affirming the messenger of Allah. And that is why one of the scholars had a dua in which he said, وَأَنْجِينِي مِنْ أَوْحَادِ التَّوْحِيد. Save me from the dangerous aspects of tawheed. For instance, not recognizing the prophets. most of brothers and sisters are Asian, Pakistani. What do you want to advise them for promoting Islam in Pakistan or other Asian countries? Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I think that the advice to give to the Muslims in generally is the same. I mean, our methodology is the same. Obviously, you take into consideration people's cultures and their climes, but basically, the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ is a universal methodology. Is it wrong to learn about sex education in a mixed atmosphere? We don't really have something called sex education in Islam. I mean, there's some basic things that the Prophet ﷺ taught, and he also there is a Sahih hadith in which somebody asked him about ghusl if there was no usayla or no, and the Prophet ﷺ indicated that you would do that, and that he pointed to Aisha, who was in the gathering, and mentioned that she and I do this. And that's an example of him teaching a hukm shar'i in which a woman was present. And there's no haya fi din. If it relates to a hukm shar'i, there's no modesty. And that's why Aisha radiallahu anha in al-Bukhari says, نِعْمُ النِّسَاء نِسَاءُ الْأَنصَارِ لَا يَمْنَعُهُنَّ الْحَيَاءُ مِنَ التَّفَقُّهِ فِي الدِّينِ. The best women are the women of the Ansar. Modesty or shame does not prevent them from asking questions in their deen that are important. Because women tend to be more modest than men, and Aisha was praising them because that's called haya madmoom, which is a disease of the heart. And Al-Ata, the great tabi'i, said, لا ينال العلم اثنان. Two people will never gain knowledge. مستكبر ومستحي. Somebody who's arrogant and somebody who's too shy. Because مفتاح العلم السؤال. The key to knowledge is asking questions. I've heard there's a hadith that the Muslims conquer Rome and their horses there will be called Dajjal. Right? Does that mean we'll go back to horses? If Y2K predictions prove correct, even most of the cars will stop because they have embedded systems in their computer chips. So they actually recommend that you get your car checked out if you do have computer chips in it, because it could stop. I really think that, it's amazing that this whole system of technology, which seems so profound, in California, lights went out for 4 hours because the computer misread a code, and lights went out in all of Northern California for 4 hours, and people were fighting at the McDonald's. That's 4 hours. You look at London, what are they going to do? I mean, you ask Allah for. But seriously, people. What are people going to do if the heating, year 2000, January 1st, and the amazing thing is that it's a Saturday night, December 31st, and then everybody goes home and suddenly the heating's off in the middle of winter. So they're already talking about contingency plans. There was one of the people in Parliament here was saying that we have to take this seriously and have some contingency plans in case there is. There's going to be something's going to happen. They just don't know the extent of it. Newsweek, January 2nd, 1997, had an article called "The Day the World Crashes," and they had worst case scenario, best case scenario, and even the best case scenario, there were a lot of problems. Worst case scenario was what he said. It'll be like Beirut or something like that. I mean, it's sad they use that as an example. Who do the scholars consider to be mujaddid of the past 100 years? I don't know. There's a Sahih hadith. إن الله يبعث على رأس كل قرن من يجدد هذا الدين. Allah will send at the head of every generation somebody who renews the deen. And some of the ulama say the man there does not indicate that it only has to be one, that it can be more than one person. Generally, the ulama recognized certain mujaddidun, like Imam Shafi'i was considered a mujaddid, Imam al-Ghazali was considered, radiallahu anhum, was considered a mujaddid, and many others throughout history. Is the World Cup and other competitions, I mean, part of the Dajjal system? Time went so fast but I really wanted to go through each one of the areas and I had slides for it and everything, but I just didn't get time to do it. There are each area of this system, which you can identify at the political level, the social level, educational level, medicine, all of the different, the Dajjal, there is a system here, and it is Dajjalic by nature. Sports is a major part of it, all right? And there was a beautiful poster here they had big in England that I saw last time I was here, and there was some, skinhead type person jumping up and down and and it said, for some people, soccer is their religion. And then on the bottom it said, we know how you feel. And it was an advertisement for a sports channel. And the point is, that is not hyperbole. For some people, soccer is their religion. It is a religion. And they go to it like they would go to church. They learn, their saints are all the heroes. They want to be just like them, the soccer players. Pele is probably at a level of prophet or something like that. Some people give no importance to Salah. They say we have to establish Khilafah. I haven't met any Muslim that does that, personally. I haven't. I mean, there are Muslims that emphasize Khilafah, and the Khilafah, it's true, we're lacking Khilafah, and our enemies recognize that. If you read Samuel Huntington's book, one of the things he says is that the Muslims, since they've lost their head, even though it was a titular head, it did not have real authority or power, he said they have not been able to regain any type of cohesion. And that is true. And we do need a khilafah, there's no doubt. And that is an important element of it. I think where we'll get into differences is what is the methodology that will bring that about. And certainly the hadith, which indicate the khilafah would remain on minhaj al-nubuwah for 30 years, is a sound hadith, and then it would become kings fighting for it, and then it would become tyrants, and then it would go back to the minhaj al-nubuwah. The vast majority of scholars indicate that that would be at the time of the Mahdi, and I would not be surprised if that's very close. I think that is going to happen, and it might happen in our lifetimes, Allahu A'lam, if Allah gives us a long life. Generations before us thought there was age was the last age, yet they survived. Like the generation before, you haven't, you got it wrong. I'll tell you something. This is a really valid question, but what I would say to you, my answer to you is, you should live your life as if the hour was going to happen tomorrow. Maybe I am wrong, but I have to live my life believing that it could happen any time, because that will prepare me psychologically for my own last hour, for my own Y2K crash, my computer crash, when I die, when I end. Because that is a sa'a. Sa'a in Arabic, there's three meanings. The sa'a, as-sughra, wusta, wal-kubra. Sa'a sughra is each one of our death, the lesser sa'a. The middle sa'a is our generation. In this room, within 100 years, everybody in this room will be dead. We'll all be dead. And that is a qiyamah for this generation. And then the sa'a kubra is where the whole earth comes to an end. So it is true, but I'll tell you, the Sahaba, there was a time when the Prophet ﷺ was describing the Dajjal, and they heard some rustling in the bushes, in the nakhil. They thought it was the Dajjal. And the point that the muhaddithin say about is the Prophet ﷺ gave them a sense of the immediacy of the hour. And the Quran says that many times. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The sa'a has drawn near. وما يدرك لعل الساعة قريب. What will convey to you, maybe the sa'a is coming close. And it says that the kuffar, that they يستعجلونها, they laugh about it and say, come on, let's see the last hour. And the mu'minun, the believers, mushfiquna minha, they're afraid of it. Right? So you should live your life as if it could happen any time. The Prophet ﷺ said the hour will come and people are buying and selling in the marketplaces. It just comes on them. And then the hadith that gives you hope is the hadith إن وقعت على أحدكم الساعة وبيده فسيلة إن استطاع أن يغرسها فليغرسها. If the hour comes and in one of your hands is a palm sprout, then, and he's able to finish planting it before the hour comes, let him finish planting it. So we have to get on with our lives and get on, but at the same time we have to prepare and not be fools. And the Prophet ﷺ was somebody who kept in his house provision for a year. One of the things Yusuf ﷺ told the Egyptian was to prepare for 7 years of famine. Sanctions for the Muslims, if we were following the Sunnah, really, and they couldn't have, sanctions wouldn't harm us. And also the mu'min eats from 1 intestine, and the kafir eats from 7 intestines. The Muslims fast 1 month out of the year. They can deal with these type of things. In the history, and I'll tell you something about Iraq, in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, one of the signs of the right before the Mahdi is Iraq is sanctioned. It's in Sahih Muslim. Iraq is sanctioned, and the wheat is not able to get to it, nor any money. And after that, Sudan or Egypt, Mosul, which includes Sudan, and then Syria, Sham, and then يظهر فيكم خليفة يحثو المال حثوة. Then the Mahdi comes, a Khalifa, who the ulama interpret to be in Mahdi, and he disperses wealth. Another sign is the Iraq, the Qurrat river will begin to become dry. And this is happening because Turkey now is beginning to divert the water, and the water tables in the Qurrat, it's a sign of the end of time. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the river will uncover a bedrock of gold. In a riwayah kanz min al-dhahab, and in a riwayah jabal, a whole mountain of gold. And when that gold is discovered, many people are going to kill over it. They'll kill for it to get that gold. So that hasn't happened yet. In your talk you mentioned the hadith indicated end of the world very close. Does that mean that Allah's deen will not prevail? No, that's my point. I didn't get to that part, which is an important part, which is that it does prevail, and that the Dajjal, when he comes at the head of a global type of government, and he travels through the earth. It says in the hadith that he'll cross the ocean 3 times in a day. In one day. In one day, 3 times. Right? Like the Concorde now, you get 3 flights a day there. And the other thing that he will enter into every city. He doesn't go to little villages. He enters into cities. And which is part of the urbanization phenomenon now. Everybody's moving into cities and leaving this happening all over the world, massive urbanization. The Dajjal enters into cities, he'll enter into every city in 40 days. And they asked him, it's a Sahih hadith, كيف سرعته يومئذ يا رسول الله? And he said, كريح or كغيث استدبرته السحاب, like a wind that leaves behind condensation. And that's, I guarantee you, it's an exact translation. Like a wind that leaves behind condensation or a cloud. And if you look at the modern, and then in another hadith, يركب حمارا ما بين أذنيه 40 ذراعا. He rides a donkey that has 40 cubits between its ears. Right? And I had a list of wingspans and worked out that actually the Learjet is almost exactly 40 cubits. Right? So, and then the other thing, one of the Sahaba thought that he was coming, the Dajjal, and he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm so frightened. And he said, from what? And he said, the Dajjal. And he said, why? And he said, because I heard he has a mountain of grain, and I heard that he commands the sky and it rains. And the hadith says, هُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. He's less significant for Allah than that. And the ulama interpret that to mean that it won't be like magic. He won't just point to the sky. There'll be asbab. But he'll have amazing asbab, means to do that. But there'll be means that people can understand, like engineers and things like that. In the light of Pakistan developing nuclear weapons, what is the Islamic position considering euphoria amongst the Muslims and the backlash of the non-Muslims? I think it's sign of the times. It's unfortunate. India, according to in India, what they're trying to do, the Americans are actually part of their New World Order policy is to support India, and I really actually wanted to show it's very interesting. You can see here, this is from Huntington's thesis, and what he's saying basically is that, you know, the next war is a civilizational war between civilizations, and what he's saying basically is that when we look at civilizations, the question is no longer which side are you on, but who are you, right? The question is no longer which side are you on, but who are you, which is why in Oklahoma, when there was a bombing, some people tried to they saw some Muslim immigrant there, and they were going to attack him. He said, no, I'm not one of those kind of Muslims. Like, I drink, and it doesn't make any difference. They don't care. Even if you're a bad Muslim, if you're a Muslim, they don't care, I guarantee you. They don't care if you're a secular Muslim. If you have a Muslim name, particularly if you're brown, right? Because he's very obsessed with brown people in the book. It's all. But anyway, you can see the West, right? These links here are less conflictual. So the broader the white is, the less conflictual it is with the West. And what he's saying is the West, right? This is the civilization that has to maintain its supremacy over the other civilizations. Now, if you look, Japan, who Hitler called them yellow Aryans, it's less conflictual. And even in South Africa, they were honorary whites. People forget that. So the Japanese are in the Trilateral Commission. They're part of the whole, they're accepted as a superior race. Orthodox Russia, less conflictual because they're Christians, even though they recognize that the Russians are very different from the Western Europeans. It's less conflictual because of Christianity, and the example of that was Bosnia. They had to support the Orthodox because at this point it's not white anymore, it's about Muslim, Christian, and so they supported that. Now you can see also Hinduism, very strange there, less conflictual. Why? Because Hinduism is the sacred cow of Western comparative religions. When the Western people realized that in fact their own roots are Indo-European, and that the European languages are rooted in Sanskrit, when they realized that, they realized these are our ancestors. And another thing about the Hindic culture is because it's a caste system, it supports many of the concepts. The word in Sanskrit for caste is varna, which means color. And in the Hinduism, the Shudra, the lowest caste are the black people, the Hindu Kush, the original Dravidian peoples that were the original inhabitants that came in and subjugated by the colonizing Aryan or Caucasus people. And so they see the Hindus as closer to them, oddly enough, even though they're mushrikeen, they're polytheists, and we believe in Jesus, and we believe in one God, and we believe in Abraham, and we believe in Yom Al-Qiyamah, all these things, they still see that they have more in common with the Hindus than they do with us. And that's an awesome thing for me. Now, if you notice also, Hindu, very close to Orthodox, right? Hierarchical, all these things. And then even Japan with China, China with Russia, so they see Russia and Japan as possible cues in. Now look at Islam. All of them more conflictual with everything except China. And this is the whole thing now. You see, China has been backing the nuclear development of Pakistan, and they do it as a card. It's leverage for them against the West. And this is why the Americans allowed the Indians to test the bomb. And then they knew, obviously, and from one point of view, even though it's just sad that this is where humanity is, from one point of view, there was a type of courage in it from the Pakistani government because they recognized that there would be massive sanctions, and the sanctions will hit much harder in Pakistan than they will in India. And even though I think Islam is very much opposed to nuclear weapons, if your enemy has a nuclear weapon, I think it would be prudent as a deterrent that you would have that, and I think there's Quranic justification for that. But again, لا يعذب بالنار إلا رب النار. No one can punish with fire except the Lord of fire. So we don't use fire as a way of killing people. It's prohibited in Islam. And nuclear weapons is using massive fire power. Why have we been created? Boy. And asking the big questions tonight. ما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. I only created jinn and ins to worship me. ليعرفون, to know me. والذي استعمركم في الأرض. He created you in order for you to civilize the earth, civilize yourselves. وجعلكم خلائق. He made you khulafa in the earth. All these things. But moreover and above everything, we were created to know Allah. That's why we were created. We're sentient beings. We have consciousness. You mentioned innovation. What is your comment on technology correcting the problems that technology caused? I mean, it's a vicious cycle. Technology creates, for every problem it solves, it creates 10 problems, and then you have to have, and it keeps the engineers busy, it keeps them in jobs, but I mean, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not against technology. I don't think Muslims are against technology. But there is a type of technology, which is Western technology, that has to be recognized for what it is. It has embedded in it a social system. It's not simply pure disembodied technology. There is a social system. It is a result of choices that these societies made based on worldviews. There are many people think that the Ottoman Turks were backward because they prohibited the printing press in Ottoman culture for 400 years, even though the Europeans had it. The ulama, if you read their fatwas, their extraordinary fatwas in their insights, they actually considered it a sacrilege to smash the Qur'an with a press. They considered that it was haram to take the Qur'an and smash it like that it should be written with a pen, and that Allah created with a pen. So they were looking from a qualitative perspective, not from a quantitative perspective. And so people who are obsessed with quantity, massification, mass production, they're going to say it was a stupid idea. But for people that want quality in their cultures, it was actually a brilliant fatwa. And I'll tell you something about the Quran. In the days when people wrote them by hand, they were cherished and honored. Now you go into a masjid and they're ripped apart, they're lying upside down. Look in your own masjid, because I judge a masjid by the Qurans in the shelves. That's how I judge a masjid. The first thing I look at when I go to a masjid, I look at those Qurans, and a lot of times I'll end up just straightening them out myself. There's no adab towards the Quran. It's just shocking that Muslims have that. It's a book that people died for, and now it's just treated like any other book, which is a result of massification, mass production. Could you please explain the sign of Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Are they thought to be Mongolians or Turks? And so there was a point that some people thought they were Turks, and Turks became Muslim. Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, it's in the Quran. They'll come in kulli hadmin yansilun. They come down from every high place, and there's hadith traditions that indicate that they were put behind a wall by Dhul Qarnayn, and Allah Ta'ala. Some of the scholars, if you look on Idrisi's map, he puts Ya'juj wa Ma'juj as Russia, up in northern Russia and Mongolia and those areas. Allah Ta'ala, where they are. I don't know. I really don't. I've thought about it a lot, and I don't know, because the hadiths are difficult to understand about them. But they do come. They're one of the major signs, and they come after Isa. Are we as Muslims supposed to believe Darwin's theory of evolution? If not, then how did there... Again, this is part of the trouble that of the crisis of knowledge in the Muslim Ummah. Evolution, as it's taught, I would say as it's taught, is kufr. because it teaches random mutation. It teaches that there's experiments by nature, and nature makes mistakes and keeps making mistakes till it gets it right, and then that right thing is a strong gene that's transmitted. And that if you study evolution, it's very much against the way Muslims view the world. That does not mean that we don't. Microevolution, what they call microevolution, is an observable fact in nature. You know, things do evolve according to their ecological niches. I mean, you can't deny that as a process. But to say that there are transitional species and these things, none of the fossil records have ever. It's all conjecture. And now they found bipedal men that precede, Australopithecus or whatever. I mean, they're very confused in their own science. If you look at the book called Darwin's Black Box by Behe, it's a very interesting critique by a biochemist about it from the cell's point of view. Could you please explain the idea of Mahdi? Is it in the prophetic tradition? Some Muslims did deny the Mahdi. Ibn Khaldun denied it, but really it's mutawatir ma'nawi. There's two types of mutawatir. Mutawatir is where there's so many transmissions that it's impossible to be alive. You have mutawatir lafzi and ma'nawi. Lafzi is when you have, it comes in the same sila or the same utterance every time. Like, من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار. That hadith, whoever lies purposely on me, let him take his place in the fire, is mutawatir lafzi. It's been transmitted in the same way by just countless numbers, over 50 Sahaba. And so the ma'nawi means the meaning. And what the ulama have a qa'idah about the hadith of the Mahdi, صحيحه غير صريح وصريحه غير صحيح. When it's clearly about the Mahdi, there's usually some criticism about the chain. But when it's intimated that it's the Mahdi, then it's sound. So for instance, كيف بكم إذا نزل فيكم عيسى ibn Maryam وإمامكم منكم? What will you be like when Isa, the son of Mary, descends amongst you and your Imam is from you? And the Imam there, which is in a Sahih Hadith, is considered to be the Mahdi. So I would not disbelieve in the Mahdi. It's in the Aqidah of the Muslims, and we do believe in it. You were asked which books give good references. Ali Akbar, Ibn Kathir, you said something about them. However, you pointed out Lewis Mumford, Pentagon of Power, is out of control. Could you please go? There are books about the Dajjal written by Muslims. Ali Akbar, I read his book, and I think there's some really useful things in there. But again, there's always going to be problems, including with my own understanding. And somebody can criticize my understanding, so I don't really want to go into critical analyses of it. Ibn Kathir's book is very strong, sound hadith. They're difficult to understand, the hadith of the end of time, which is why in the hadith it said, if it gets too confusing, then just know that your Lord doesn't have one eye. So that's the definitive statement. If it gets too confusing, just know he doesn't have one eye. So the dollar is definitely not our Lord. And there are a lot of people worshiping the dollar. You know, really, there's a lot of people worshiping. That's a Dajjal, because it's a piece of paper. And there's